The dust of Helmand Province tastes like copper and regret. Specialist Sarah Mackenzie knows this because she's been breathing it for 7 months now. Every grain settling into her lungs like memories she cannot shake. The Barrett M107 strapped across her back weighs 33 pounds, but today it feels like carrying her father's coffin all over again. She adjusts the rifle's position as the patrol column moves through the dried riverbed, boots crunching on stones that haven't seen water in a generation. Ahead of her, Sergeant Major Daniel Reeves walks with the careful gait of a man testing each step before committing his weight. His M24 rifle hangs loose across his chest, and even from 6 feet behind him, Sarah can see the tremor in his hands when he reaches up to adjust his helmet. 3 times in the past week, she has watched him miss shots that should have been simple. 600 meters, clear sight lines, minimal wind, the kind of shots her father could have made blind drunk at midnight in a thunderstorm. The kind of shots she makes in her sleep. But Sarah Mackenzie is a combat engineer. Her job is to carry equipment, clear routes, and keep her mouth shut about the things she sees. The fact that she is the best natural marksman in Bravo Company means nothing when the roster already has a designated shooter. The fact that Danny Reeves cannot hit a stationary target at 800 meters means everything when that target is trying to kill them. The radio crackles. Captain Hayes' voice cuts through the static with the kind of calm that comes from 3 deployments and too many funerals. Contact north. Enemy fighters, 800 meters. Reeves, you're up. Sarah drops to one knee automatically, scanning the ridgeline through her spotting scope, while Danny moves forward to set up his shooting position. She can see them now, 3 Taliban fighters moving between rocks, AK-47s slung casual across their shoulders like they are walking to market instead of setting up an ambush. Danny settles behind his rifle and Sarah watches his hands. The tremor is worse today. His breathing is shallow and quick when it should be deep and controlled. She knows what is going to happen before he even touches the trigger. The first shot cracks across the valley and kicks up dust 3 feet to the left of the nearest fighter. The Taliban scatter like startled birds, suddenly aware that someone is shooting at them, but unclear about where the danger is coming from. This should be the moment when Danny corrects his aim and puts them down. This should be simple. The second shot goes wide right. The third shot does not even come close. "God damn it, Danny!" Captain Hayes' voice over the radio carries more frustration than anger. "Fall back. We're moving." The patrol shifts east, away from the contact, and Sarah feels the familiar burn of watching opportunity slip away. She knows the wind patterns in this valley. She knows the temperature gradient and the way the heat shimmer distorts targets beyond 700 meters. She knows that with the Barrett on her back, she could have ended that contact in 2 shots, maybe 3. But knowing and doing are separated by a chain of command that does not care about natural talent or engineering degrees, or the fact that her father was one of the best snipers the Army never officially recognized. That night, back at Forward Operating Base Wilson, Sarah cannot sleep. The plywood walls of her quarters do nothing to muffle the sound of generators and distant radio chatter. At 0300 hours, she gives up on rest and takes the Barrett outside to the maintenance area, where a single fluorescent bulb casts everything in sickly yellow light. She strips the rifle with the kind of muscle memory that comes from doing the same task 500 times. Bolt carrier group, buffer spring, trigger assembly. Each piece laid out on a clean cloth in perfect order. The engineering part of her brain finds comfort in the precision of it, the way each component fits together with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Her father taught her to shoot when she was 8 years old on the ranch in Montana that no longer exists. The bank took it in 2009 after the economy collapsed and the cattle prices dropped below sustainable levels. But before that, before the foreclosure and the shame and the slow death of everything her family had built over 3 generations, there had been Sunday afternoons with a .22 rifle and paper targets tacked to hay bales. "Breathe between heartbeats, baby girl." Her father's voice in memory, patient and steady. "The rifle doesn't care if you're girl or boy, only if you're good." She had been good. Good enough to win the Montana State Junior Championship at age 14. Good enough to make the NCAA rifle team at University of Montana and win 3 conference titles. Good enough to be an alternate for the 2008 Olympic team, close enough to taste it, but not quite close enough to make the final roster. And then her father had died. The official cause was listed as complications from Gulf War syndrome, Exposure to chemical agents and depleted uranium during Desert Storm finally catching up with him 20 years later. She had been 21 in her senior year of mechanical engineering, and the news had come by phone at 2 in the morning. By the time she drove the 6 hours home to Great Falls, he was already gone. The funeral had been full of old soldiers with gray hair and tired eyes. Men who called her Father Jack and shook her hand too firmly while saying he was a good man and a hell of a shot. One of them, a weathered Hispanic man with sergeant major stripes and a chest full of ribbons, had pulled her aside after the service. "Your daddy was the best I ever saw." Command Sergeant Major Luis Ortega, soft voice carrying authority. "We served together in Iraq, February 91. 100-hour war, they called it. Rough times. Your father kept a lot of soldiers alive with that rifle. You got his gift?" Sarah had nodded because speaking felt impossible with her throat locked tight. "Then don't waste it. Honor him by being better than he was. That's what he'd want." She had tried. Graduated with honors, landed a job at Boeing in Seattle designing load-bearing structures for commercial aircraft. Good salary, good apartment, good life. But something had been missing. Every time she saw news footage from Afghanistan, every time another soldier came home in a flag-draped coffin, she felt the pull of unfinished business. Her father had served in Desert Storm. His father before him had served in Korea. The Mackenzie family had sent sons to every American war since the Revolution. And now there was only her, the last of the line, a daughter instead of a son, but carrying the same blood and the same gift for putting bullets exactly where they needed to go. She had enlisted on the 4th anniversary of her father's death. Combat engineer because infantry was still closed to women in 2010, but at least she would be outside the wire, doing something that mattered. The recruiter had barely glanced at her Olympic alternate credentials, more interested in her engineering degree and the fact that she could pass the physical fitness test on the first try. Basic training at Fort Leonard Wood had been easy. Engineering school had been easier. The instructors had noticed her marksmanship scores and suggested sniper school, but the pipeline was still officially male only, and suggesting she get special treatment felt like admitting she could not make it on merit alone. So she became a combat engineer, and when Bravo Company needed someone to carry the backup Barrett M107 on patrol, she volunteered. 33 pounds was nothing compared to the weight of wondering what her father would think of her serving coffee on a forward operating base instead of using the gift he had given her. Specialist Mackenzie. The voice cuts through her memories like a knife. She looks up to find Captain Derek Hayes standing in the maintenance area doorway, arms crossed, studying her with the kind of attention that makes soldiers nervous. Derek Hayes is 32 years old and looks 50. 3 deployments in 4 years will do that to a man. His wife had been an Army nurse stationed at Bagram in 2010 when a supposedly friendly Afghan policeman opened fire in a green-on-blue attack that killed 4 Americans. Hayes had been at a different base when it happened, helpless to do anything but identify her body and ship it home to her parents in Ohio. He never talked about it, never showed anything except professional competence and the kind of distant courtesy that kept subordinates at arm's length. But Sarah had heard the stories from soldiers who had served with him before. The man who came back from his wife's funeral was not the same man who had left. "Sir." Sarah stands at attention automatically, aware that she is in PT gear at 3 in the morning with a disassembled rifle that technically belongs to Danny Reeves. At ease, Hayes steps closer, examining the Barrett's components laid out on the cloth. "You do this often? Tear down other people's weapons in the middle of the night?" Sarah hesitates, measuring her words. "The rifle needed maintenance, sir. Barrel cleaning, bolt lubrication, standard care. Standard care that Sergeant Reeves didn't perform himself." Hayes picks up the bolt carrier group, examining it under the light. "How many times you done this? Broke down a Barrett, put it back together?" "Couple 100 times, sir, maybe more." Sarah keeps her voice neutral, but her heart rate kicks up because this conversation is heading somewhere, and she is not sure if she wants to arrive at the destination. Hayes sets the bolt down and turns to look at her directly. His eyes are pale blue, the kind that seem to see through excuses and bullshit and straight into whatever truth a person is trying to hide. "I read your file when you transferred to my company. NC, a rifle champion, 3 years running, Olympic alternate 2008, mechanical engineering degree from University of Montana with a 3.8 GPA, volunteered for combat engineer because infantry wasn't open to women. Those facts accurate?" "Yes, sir." "And you carry a Barrett M107 on every patrol we run, but you've never fired it in combat. That also accurate? Sarah feels her jaw tighten but keeps her voice level. I'm not the designated marksman, sir. Sergeant Reeves has that role. Sergeant Reeves missed 4 shots today at a range you could probably make blindfolded. Hayes does not phrase it as a question. He also missed 6 shots last week, 3 shots the week before that. I'm seeing a pattern, Specialist Mackenzie, and the pattern is that Bravo Company's designated marksman can't hit the broad side of a barn from the inside. Sir, Sarah stops because defending Danny feels disloyal, but confirming Hayes' assessment feels worse. How far can you shoot? Hayes asks suddenly. Accurately, I mean. What's your maximum effective range? The question catches her off guard. Training max was 1,800 meters, sir, but I've studied ballistics for longer ranges. Run calculations for 2,500, 3,000. Never had opportunity to test them in practice. But you think you could make those shots? Not a question, a statement waiting for confirmation. Sarah thinks about her father's rifle, the Gulf War-era M40 that came home with his personal effects. She thinks about the scope she salvaged from it and mounted on her personal AR-15 back in Montana, spending weekends at the range pushing her limits. She thinks about the ballistics manuals she bought with her own money and studied by flashlight in her hooch, calculating bullet drop and wind drift and Coriolis effect until the numbers burn themselves into her brain like scripture. I think with the right conditions and proper setup, I could engage targets beyond 3,000 meters, sir. Whether I could hit them is a different question, but I'd like the chance to try. Hayes studies her for a long moment, and Sarah can feel him weighing something in his mind, some calculation that has nothing to do with ballistics and everything to do with trust. Your father was Jack Mackenzie, 1st Infantry Division, Gulf War. That correct? Yes, sir. Sarah's throat tightens because nobody has mentioned her father since she arrived in country. It feels like hearing a ghost name spoken aloud. Command Sergeant Major Ortega served with him. Gunny talks about Jack sometimes when he's had a few drinks and feeling nostalgic. Says your father made a shot during the 100-Hour War, February 27, 1991. That saved an entire mechanized battalion. 2,847 meters across the open desert. Target was an Iraqi Republican Guard artillery spotter coordinating fire on our armor. Your dad put 1 round through the man's chest from over 1.5 miles away. Sarah's breath catches. She had known her father was a good shot, had heard vague stories about Desert Storm. But this is something else entirely. 2,800 meters in 1991 with Gulf War-era equipment would have been nearly impossible. The fact that he made it across open desert with wind and heat shimmer moves it into the realm of legend. I never knew, she says quietly. He never talked about the war. Not to me. To do. Your father carried it until it to do. Your father carried it until it killed him, according to Gunny. Gulf War syndrome officially, but Gunny says the real cause was a lifetime of knowing that every trigger pull changes something in a man that can't be changed back. The words land like a punch to Sarah's chest because they confirm something she has always suspected but never wanted to admit. Her father had not just died from chemical exposure. He had died from the weight of 20 years carrying memories that never got lighter. Why are you telling me this, sir? Sarah's voice comes out rougher than intended. Because tomorrow we're getting a mission brief that's going to require a sniper shot beyond anything Sergeant Reeves can accomplish. Hayes sets down the receiver and meets her eyes again. And I need to know if Jack Mackenzie's daughter inherited more than just his gift for shooting. I need to know if you inherited his spine. The question hangs in the air between them like smoke. Sarah thinks about her father teaching her to shoot, patient and steady. She thinks about the ranch they lost and the dreams that died with it. She thinks about the engineering job she left behind because it felt like hiding from something she could not name. She thinks about 7 months in Afghanistan carrying a rifle she has never been allowed to fire while watching men who are less capable take shots they cannot make. I'm here to serve, sir, whatever the mission requires. Hayes nods slowly, something like approval crossing his face. Get some sleep, Specialist. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. And Mackenzie, when the time comes, I need you to be ready. Not just physically ready, ready to live with what comes after. He turns and walks out of the maintenance area, leaving Sarah alone with the disassembled rifle and the ghost of her father's legacy. She finishes reassembling the Barrett with hands that are steadier than they should be, muscle memory taking over while her mind processes what Hayes just revealed. Her father made a 2,800-meter shot in Desert Storm. The longest confirmed sniper kill in modern military history is 2,430 meters, held by a British sniper in Afghanistan. Her father exceeded that by 400 meters with 30-year-old equipment in conditions that would have made the shot nearly impossible. And he never told her, never claimed the record, never sought recognition, just carried the knowledge quietly until the weight of it helped kill him. Sarah thinks about what Hayes said, ready to live with what comes after. As if making the shot is the easy part and everything that follows is the real test. She straps the Barrett back into its case and heads toward her quarters. But sleep feels impossible now. Instead, she detours to the plywood structure that serves as the company TOC, where a bored-looking specialist is manning the overnight radio watch. Got any coffee? Sarah asks. The specialist gestures toward a pot that looks like it has been cooking since the Soviet invasion. Sarah pours herself a cup of something approximating motor oil and takes it outside to the concrete barriers that line the perimeter. The stars over Afghanistan are sharper than they ever were in Montana, unfiltered by light pollution or moisture. She finds the Big Dipper and traces north to Polaris, the same stars her father would have seen from forward positions in the Kuwaiti desert. The same stars that have watched soldiers from every American war make peace with the things they have to do. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the wire, people are sleeping who will be dead tomorrow. Sarah does not know who yet, does not know if it will be Taliban fighters or American soldiers or Afghan civilians caught in the middle. But she knows with absolute certainty that tomorrow will demand something from her that cannot be taken back. And when that moment comes, she will either be her father's daughter or she will be something less. There is no middle ground between making the shot and missing it. No second place medal for trying hard. Just the bullet and the target and the 7.2 seconds it takes for physics to decide who lives and who dies. She drinks the terrible coffee and watches the stars wheel overhead and thinks about a man she barely got to know, making an impossible shot 30 years ago in a desert that has seen empires rise and fall. Wonders if he stood somewhere like this the night before, weighing the mathematics of death against the certainty that someone had to pull the trigger. Wonders if he knew then that the shot would follow him home, would settle into his bones like the chemical agents, would eventually take him just as surely as any bullet. At 0500, Command Sergeant Major Luis Ortega finds her still sitting on the barriers. He is 61 years old and looks like a man carved from teak and barbed wire. Every line on his face a story he will never tell. The rumor mill says he enlisted in 1973, right after the draft ended, and never looked back. 40 years of service across every conflict and police action the United States has gotten itself into. Can't sleep either? Ortega settles onto the barrier beside her with the careful movement of a man whose knees have absorbed too many airborne jumps. Too much coffee, sir. Sarah gestures with the empty cup. Bullshit. Ortega's voice carries the rough edges of too many years smoking cigarettes that he officially quit a decade ago. Hayes told you about your daddy's shot. It is not a question, so Sarah does not bother treating it like one. 2847 meters, Iraqi desert, 91. You were there. I was the spotter. Ortega stares out at the darkness beyond the wire. February 27th, 1991. Final day of the ground war. We were racing north with the armor, trying to cut off Republican Guard units retreating from Kuwait. Your daddy and I were in a Bradley, supposed to be providing overwatch for the column. Then we spotted this Iraqi forward observer on a ridge, calling in artillery fire that was tearing our tanks apart. Ortega pulls out a cigarette, looks at it, puts it back unlit. Jack says to me, I can make that shot. And I'm looking at the range and the wind and the hate shimmer and thinking he's lost his mind. We had an M40 rifle, good weapon but not a miracle worker. I run the numbers in my head, tell him it's impossible. He says nothing's impossible, just improbable. Then he asked me to do the math anyway. Did you? Sarah asked quietly. Did the math. 2847 meters, 20 mile per hour, crosswind from the east. Heat shimmer reducing visibility, maybe 30%. Target moving. I calculated he'd need to aim 14 feet high and 10 feet right, account for bullet drop that would arc like a damn rainbow. Told him even if he did everything perfect, odds were maybe 1 in 5 the bullet would land anywhere near the target. Sarah can picture it. The Bradley, the desert heat, 2 soldiers doing impossible calculus in their heads while armor burned in the valley below. What did he say? He said, 1 in 5 is better than 0. Then he took the shot. Ortega finally lights the cigarette, takes a long drag. I watched through the spotting scope, saw the muzzle flash from his rifle, started counting seconds. 7.1 seconds later, the Iraqi spotter dropped like someone cut his strings. Cleanest kill I ever saw at any range, let alone that distance. The silence stretches between them, filled with the memory of men who are not here to tell their own stories. We never reported it official, Ortega continues. Mission tempo was too intense during the ground war, and Jack didn't want the attention anyway. Said putting your name on a kill record is like signing your soul over to something you can't take back. He just wanted to do the ball and go home. But that shot stopped the artillery barrage, saved maybe 50 tanks and 200 soldiers. Made a difference when it mattered. Sarah absorbs this, trying to reconcile the father she knew with the man who could make that shot and then bury the achievement like it meant nothing. Why didn't he ever tell me? The question comes out smaller than she intends. Because he loved you too much to burden you with it. Ortega flicks ash into the darkness. Your daddy came home from Desert Storm with ghosts, Sarah. Every man who saw real combat did. But shooters carry a special kind of ghost. Every target has a name you'll never know, a family you'll never meet, a life you ended from so far away, they never even knew you existed. Jack made that shot because it needed making. But it cost him something, and he didn't want you paying the same price. I joined the Army to honor him, Sarah says, to use the gift he gave me. I know. And tomorrow you're going to get your chance. Ortega turns to look at her directly. Hayes told you about the mission brief? Not the details, just that it's going to require a long-range shot. Hamid Al-Zawahiri, the engineer they call him, bomb maker responsible for 47 American deaths in the past 18 months. IEDs so sophisticated they're damn near impossible to detect. He's meeting with a warlord tomorrow afternoon at a compound in the Sangin Valley. Intelligence puts the meeting at 1400 hours, 15-minute window, and the only viable overwatch position is 3,147 meters from the compound. Sarah's breath catches. 3147. That's nearly 700 meters beyond her father's record shot, beyond anything anyone has attempted with modern equipment under combat conditions. Danny can't make that shot, Ortega says flatly. Hell, I don't know if anyone can make that shot. But Hayes thinks you might. And I promised your daddy a long time ago that if you ever served, I'd watch over you. So I'm asking you straight, no bullshit. Can you make a shot at 3147 meters? Sarah thinks about the ballistics. At that range, bullet flight time would be over 7 seconds. Drop would be measured in feet, not inches. Wind drift could push the round off target by meters if she miscalculated. The Coriolis effect from the Earth's rotation would actually matter. Temperature, altitude, humidity, barometric pressure, every variable would stack up like a house of cards waiting to collapse. But she has run these calculations 100 times in her notebook, has studied the Barrett M107's ballistics until she can recite them from memory, has spent 7 months in this valley learning its wind patterns and temperature gradients, has her father's genetics and his gift and maybe something of his spine. I can calculate it, she says carefully. Whether I can execute it is a different question, but I'd rather try and fail than watch someone else not even attempt it. Ortega nods slowly. That's what your daddy said in Iraq, right before he made the impossible possible. He stands up, knees cracking in protest, and drops the cigarette to grind it under his boot. Get some rest, specialist. Tomorrow you're going to make history or you're going to fail spectacularly. Either way, you're going to learn what your father learned, that some shots change everything, and you can't undo the change no matter how much you might want to later. Ortega walks away into the pre-dawn darkness, leaving Sarah alone with the weight of legacy and the certainty that tomorrow will redefine everything she thought she knew about herself. She sits on the barrier until the sun starts to paint the eastern sky in shades of red and gold, watches the light creep across the mountains that have watched empires rise and fall, that will still be here long after she is dust in memory. Thinks about her father in the Iraqi desert making an impossible shot that saved hundreds of lives, but could not save him from the cost of making it. Thinks about what it means to inherit not just a gift, but a burden. To carry a rifle that weighs 33 pounds and a legacy that weighs so much more. At 0600, she heads to the mess hall for breakfast she cannot taste. At 0700, she attends the mission brief where Captain Hayes lays out the tactical situation with maps and satellite photos that show a compound nestled in a valley, like a target waiting for a bullet it will never see coming. And at 0730, When Hayes asks if anyone has questions about the mission parameters, Sarah Mackenzie raises her hand and says the words that will change everything. "Sir, I volunteer to be the primary shooter." The room goes silent. 20 soldiers stare at her like she just volunteered to walk on water. Danny Reeves, sitting in the front row, turns to look at her with an expression Sarah cannot read. Relief, maybe. Or shame. Or both. Hayes meets her eyes across the room and she sees something there that might be respect or might be pity. "Noted. Specialist Mackenzie, report to my office after this brief. We need to discuss your qualifications." Which is military speak for we need to discuss whether you're actually capable of making this shot or if you're just another soldier with more confidence than sense. But Sarah sits through the rest of the brief with her spine straight and her hands steady because she is Jack Mackenzie's daughter, and some things are inherited through blood and bone and the accumulated weight of men who made impossible shots and then carried the cost until it killed them. Tomorrow she will either prove that she inherited her father's gift, or she will prove that some legacies are better left buried with the men who forged them. The morning sun climbs higher, and somewhere in the Sangin Valley, a bomb maker named Hamid Al-Zawahiri plans his afternoon meeting, unaware that physics and fate and a dead man's daughter are about to converge on him from 3,147 meters away. The math is simple. The execution will be anything but. And Sarah Mackenzie has until tomorrow at 1400 hours to become the shooter her father was, or to learn that some distances cannot be closed no matter how perfect the calculations. The briefing room feels smaller than it should. Captain Derek Hayes sits behind a gray metal desk that has seen better deployments, better wars, better men making better decisions. Sarah Mackenzie stands at attention in front of him, aware that the next 5 minutes will either open a door or slam it shut forever. Hayes does not look up from the file folder in front of him. Her service record, probably. Every qualification score, every fitness test, every performance review, reduced to numbers on paper that cannot capture what it feels like to carry your father's ghost on your back for 7 months while watching other men fail at the one thing you know you were born to do. "Sit down, specialist." Hayes gestures to a folding chair that wobbles when Sarah lowers herself onto it. "Tell me why you think you can make a shot that's 700 meters beyond anything you've ever attempted." Sarah has prepared for this, has spent the hours since the mission, brief running calculations in her head, organizing arguments like engineering proofs. But looking at Hayes now, she realizes he does not want calculations. He wants truth. "My father made a 2847-meter shot in Desert Storm with 1991-era equipment across open desert and heat shimmer. I have his genetics, his training, and tools that are 30 years more advanced. The math says it's possible. My gut says I can do it." "Your gut." Hayes closes the folder and leans back in his chair until it creaks. "Your gut hasn't been tested in combat. Your gut hasn't had to pull a trigger knowing that if you miss, people die. Your gut is still civilian, Specialist Mackenzie, no matter how many qualification ranges you've aced." The words sting because they are true. Sarah has never fired a shot in anger, has never felt the weight of knowing another human being is in her crosshairs, has never had to live with the aftermath of ending a life from a distance so great the target never even knows death is coming. "You're right, sir, I haven't been tested, but Danny Reeves can't make this shot. We both know it. So the question isn't whether I'm ready. The question is whether you're willing to let the mission fail because I haven't proven myself yet, or whether you're willing to take a chance on something that might work." Hayes studies her for a long moment. Outside, the morning sounds of the firebase drift through the thin walls. Diesel generators, helicopter rotors, men shouting coordinates into radios. The machinery of war grinding forward regardless of individual doubts or fears. "Sergeant Reeves came to see me an hour ago." Hayes' voice drops lower, more private. "He told me about his condition." Sarah's stomach drops. Danny confessed, which means either he has more courage than she gave him credit for, or he has reached the point where hiding the truth costs more than admitting it. "He's got early-stage Parkinson's disease," Hayes continues. "Been hiding it for 6 months because he's 8 months from pension and afraid of losing everything after 30 years of service. His hands shake so badly some mornings he can't hold a coffee cup steady, let alone a rifle. And I never noticed because I was too busy managing a company in a war zone to pay attention to the human cost of keeping men in the field past their expiration date." The guilt in Hayes' voice is sharp enough to cut. Sarah waits because there is nothing she can say that will make this easier for either of them. "Danny volunteered to spot for you tomorrow. Says you're the best shooter he's ever seen, and it would be his honor to help you make the shot, he can't. Hayes meets her eyes directly. That's the kind of integrity I wish I'd recognized earlier. The kind that makes a man admit when he's broken instead of pretending until someone gets killed because of his pride. Is he being court-martialed? The question comes out before Sarah can stop it. Number Hayes shakes his head. He's being medically evaluated and probably discharged, but honorably with full benefits. I made some calls. Pentagon owes me favors. Danny Reeves gets to go home to his daughters with his pension intact and his dignity preserved. But that means Bravo Company needs a new designated marksman, and we need one before 1400 hours tomorrow. The implication hangs in the air between them like cordite smoke. I can make the shots, sir. Sarah keeps her voice level even though her heart is hammering against her ribs. Give me the chance to prove it. Hayes opens a different folder, this one containing satellite imagery and mission parameters. The compound where Hamid Al-Zawahiri will be meeting his warlord contact sits in the Sangin Valley like a tumor waiting to be excised. Intelligence photos show a cluster of mud brick buildings surrounded by poppy fields and irrigation ditches. The only viable overwatch position is a rocky outcropping designated Point Romeo, elevation 7,400 feet, bearing 180 degrees from the target. 3,147 meters. Hayes taps the distance marker on the photo. Do you understand what that means? Not just the ballistics, the implications. If you make this shot, you'll hold the record for the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history. There will be media attention, investigations, people questioning whether it was luck or skill. Your life will change in ways you can't anticipate. And if I miss, Sarah asked? If you miss, Hamid Al-Zawahiri continues building bombs that kill American soldiers and Afghan civilians. He trains more bomb makers who spread across 3 provinces. Intelligence estimates his network is responsible for 47 coalition deaths in the past 18 months, and that number increases every week. Missing isn't just failure, it's condemnation. Sarah thinks about 47 flag-draped coffins, 47 families getting the visit from casualty notification officers, 47 holes torn in the fabric of people's lives. Thinks about her own father's funeral and multiplies that grief by 47. I won't miss, sir. Hayes holds her gaze for 3 seconds that feel like 3 hours. Then he slides a document across the desk. Sign this. It's acknowledgement that you're volunteering for designated marksman duties effective immediately. It also acknowledges that you understand the risks, the responsibilities, and the fact that if this goes sideways, I'm the one who authorized it, and I'm the one who'll take the fall. But you'll be the one who has to live with pulling the trigger. Sarah signs without hesitation. Her handwriting looks steadier than her hands feel. One more thing. Hayes pulls out a different paper, this one older and worn at the edges. This is a letter your father wrote to Command Sergeant Major Ortega in 2008, a few months before he died. Gunny gave it to me after you volunteered this morning, said you should read it before you commit to this path. The letter is written in her father's familiar angular script, the same handwriting she remembers from birthday cards and notes left on the refrigerator. Seeing it now, years after his death, feels like touching a live wire. Luis, the letter begins. If you're reading this, I'm probably gone and Sarah's probably thinking about serving. Don't try to stop her. She's got the gift and the spine for it. Better than I ever was. But do me a favor. Tell her the truth about Iraq. Tell her I made that shot because 200 soldiers needed me to, not because I wanted to be a hero. Tell her the target was a man with a family and a life, and I took all of that from 3,000 meters away while he never knew I existed. Tell her that shot saved lives, but it cost me something I could never get back. The peace of mind that comes from not knowing if you're a good man doing bad things or a bad man pretending to be good. I lived with that question for 20 years, and it never got easier. The chemicals they exposed us to are killing me now, but I've been dying inside since February '91. If Sarah serves, if she takes that same path, she needs to know the price isn't just the bullet. It's every night after, wondering if you're still human or if you crossed a line you can't uncross. She's stronger than me, maybe strong enough to carry it better. But make sure she chooses this knowing what it costs, not just what it achieves. Your friend Jack. Sarah reads the letter 3 times. Each reading hits differently. The first time she hears her father's voice. The second time she understands his warning. The third time she feels the weight of what he could not tell her when he was alive, but needed her to know before she followed his path. He killed himself, didn't he? Sarah looks up at Hayes. It wasn't really Gulf War syndrome. Hayes' silence is confirmation enough. Gunny and I covered it up, listed it as complications from chemical exposure, so you'd get the survivor benefits and military burial. Your father made that choice, Sarah, not because he was weak, but because 20 years of carrying what he carried broke something inside him that couldn't be fixed. We didn't want you to know because we didn't want you to think less of him. I don't think less of him. Sarah's voice cracks but holds. I think he was human, and humans break when you put enough weight on them for long enough. But that doesn't mean the weight wasn't worth carrying. Hayes nods slowly. Tomorrow at 0400, you'll move to Point Romeo with Sergeant Reeves spotting, Sergeant Major Ortega on security, and me as mission commander. You'll have approximately 6 hours to set up, range the target, and wait for Al-Zawahiri to appear. When he does, you'll have maybe 15 minutes to make the shot before he leaves and we lose our window. One shot, one chance. Everything riding on 7.2 seconds of bullet flight, and whether you calculated the physics correctly. Sarah stands, the letter still in her hand. I'll be ready, sir. I know you will. Hayes stands as well. That's what scares me. Your father was ready too, and being ready didn't save him from what came after. The rest of the day passes in a blur of preparation. Sarah inventories ammunition, settling on M33 ball rounds that offer the best combination of velocity and ballistic coefficient for extreme range work. She checks and rechecks the Barrett 0, confirming that the rifle is calibrated perfectly for the base conditions she'll be working from. She studies meteorological forecasts for the Sangin Valley, committing temperature curves and wind patterns to memory. Danny Reeves finds her in the armory at 1600 hours. His hands are steadier than they were this morning. Or maybe Sarah is just seeing him differently now that the truth is out in the open. He carries his spotting scope and a notebook filled with range cards and environmental data. Heard you're primary tomorrow. Danny's voice carries no resentment, only something that might be relief. Also heard you know about my condition. Captain Hayes told me. Sarah continues cleaning the Barrett's barrel, using the repetitive motion to avoid looking at Danny directly. I'm sorry. About the Parkinson's. About having to give this up. Don't be sorry. Danny sets his gear down on the workbench. I've been living with this secret for 6 months, watching my hands betray me a little more every day, terrified that someone would die because I was too proud to admit I was broken. You volunteering? That's not you taking something from me. That's you saving me from myself. The honesty in his voice makes Sarah look up. Danny Reeves is 52 years old and looks every year of it right now. 30 years in the Army, has carved lines into his face deep as dry riverbeds. But his eyes are clear in a way she has not seen before. The eyes of a man who has set down a burden he was never meant to carry alone. I'm going to spot for you tomorrow, Danny continues. Going to do everything I can to help you make that shot. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because you're better at this than I ever was, even before the shake has started. And because I made a promise to myself after my old man drank himself to death, that I wouldn't let pride kill me the way it killed him. Asking for help isn't weakness, specialist. It's the only way any of us survive. Sarah thinks about her own father, about the letter she read this morning, about men who carry weight until it crushes them because they believe asking for help is the same as admitting defeat. Thank you, Sergeant Major, for trusting me with this, for being honest about what you're going through. That takes more courage than making any shot. Danny almost smiles. We'll see if you still think that tomorrow after you've been lying in the dirt for 6 hours waiting for one perfect moment. Sniper work isn't about courage. It's about patience and precision and being willing to do violence from so far away that it feels like mathematics instead of murder. Is that what it felt like for you? Sarah asks. She's. The times you had to pull the trigger in combat? Sometimes. Danny stares at the Barrett on the workbench. Other times it felt like the most personal thing in the world, even from 1,000 meters away. You're taking someone's husband, someone's father, someone's son. The distance doesn't change that. Just makes it easier to pretend you're solving an equation instead of ending a life. The words settle into Sarah's bones like calcium deposits, hardening into knowledge she wishes she did not need. But this is the education her father tried to spare her from, and Danny is offering it freely because tomorrow she will need it. They spend the next 3 hours running through range estimation drills and wind reading exercises. Danny teaches her tricks learned from 30 years of looking through scopes, how to judge mirage patterns to estimate heat shimmer, how to watch vegetation movement at different distances to build a wind map, how to account for spin drift and Coriolis effect at ranges where the Earth's rotation actually matters. At 2200 hours, Command Sergeant Major Ortega joins them in the armory. He carries coffee in a battered thermos, in the kind of presence that makes even colonels straighten their posture. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day," Gunny says, pouring coffee into 3 cups that have seen better decades. "Figured you could use some fuel that doesn't taste like the motor pool recycled their oil change." The coffee is strong enough to strip paint and taste like heaven. Sarah drinks it gratefully while Ortega settles onto a stool that creaks under his weight. "Your daddy and I, we spent a lot of nights like this before missions." Ortega's voice carries the rough edges of too many years and too many cigarettes. Drinking bad coffee, checking gear, pretending we weren't scared shitless of what morning would bring. "He ever tell you what he was afraid of?" "No, sir, he never talked about the fear." "That's because the fear wasn't about dying." Ortega takes a long drink of coffee. "Jack was afraid of missing. Afraid that when the moment came and people were depending on him, he'd fail and good men would pay the price for his failure. That's what kept him up nights. Not the enemy, not the danger. The possibility that his best wouldn't be good enough." Sarah understands this fear intimately, has felt it coiled in her stomach since she volunteered this morning. The weight of knowing that 47 deaths will be avenged or multiplied, depending on whether she calculated the wind drift correctly. "How did he deal with it?" Sarah asks. "The fear of failing?" "He didn't deal with it. He used it." Ortega refills his cup. "Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you checking your math one more time, keeps you from getting cocky and sloppy. Your daddy was afraid every single time he put his eye to that scope, but he never let the fear stop him from taking the shot when it needed taking." Danny nods agreement. "Fear and confidence aren't at opposites. They're partners. You need both. Confidence to attempt the impossible. Fear to make sure you don't fuck it up through carelessness." The 3 of them sit in companionable silence for a while, drinking coffee and listening to the night sounds of the fire base. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter spools up for a medevac mission. Closer, guards call out rotation changes at the entry control point. The familiar rhythms of military life continuing regardless of individual dramas or fears. At 0100 hours, Hayes appears in the doorway. "Get some sleep. All of you. We roll at 0400 and I need everyone sharp." They disperse to their separate quarters. Sarah lies on her bunk staring at the plywood ceiling, knowing sleep is impossible but trying anyway. Her mind keeps running the same calculations over and over. 3,147 meters. 7.2 seconds of flight time, 152 inches of bullet drop. Wind drift of approximately 8 feet, assuming 15-mile-per-hour crosswind. Coriolis effect deflection of 5.1 inches to the right. Temperature correction factor for 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Altitude correction for 7,400 feet elevation. The numbers are solid. She has checked them a dozen times, but numbers are theory, and tomorrow will be reality. And the gap between those two things is where bullets miss and people die. At 0300, she gives up on sleep and begins putting on her gear. Body armor, load-bearing vest, helmet, gloves. Each piece of equipment settling into familiar positions. The Barrett goes into its drag bag, 33 pounds of precision engineering that will either make her famous or prove that some distances cannot be closed no matter how perfect the mathematics. The team assembles at the vehicle staging area at 0345. 4 soldiers climbing into an MRAP that smells like diesel and sweat and the accumulated fear of everyone who has ridden in it before. Hayes drives, Ortega rides shotgun, Danny and Sarah in the back with the gear between them like a barrier against conversation. The drive to Point Romeo takes 90 minutes along roads that barely deserve the name. Twice they stop while engineers check for IEDs. Once they detour around a wadi that recent rains have made impassable. The sky begins to lighten in the east, painting the mountains in shades of gold and amber that would be beautiful if Sarah could focus on anything except the mission ahead. They reach the drop point at 0530 and move on foot for the final kilometer. The rocky outcropping, designated Point Romeo, sits above the valley floor like a predator's perch, offering clear lines of sight across terrain that has watched empires rise and fall for 5,000 years. Sarah sets up the Barrett while Danny establishes the spotting position. Hayes coordinates with the Tactical Operations Center via encrypted radio. Ortega pulls security, scanning approaches with the vigilance of a man who has survived 40 years of combat by never assuming anywhere is safe. The sun climbs higher and the temperature rises from cold to merely cool to uncomfortably warm. Sarah settles into the shooting position behind the Barrett, feeling the rifle's bipod legs dig into the rocky ground. Through the scope, the target compound appears as a cluster of brown rectangles shimmering in the heat haze. At this distance, men would look like ants, buildings like toys arranged by a child playing war. Danny lies beside her with the spotting scope, his notebook open to a fresh page for recording environmental conditions. Every 30 minutes he takes readings, wind speed and direction at multiple points along the bullet's projected path, temperature and humidity, barometric pressure, each variable feeding into the equation that will determine whether Sarah's bullet finds its target or disappears into the Afghan dirt. At 0900, Danny reports wind shift from southwest to west-southwest, velocity increasing from 12 to 15 miles per hour with the gusts to 18. Sarah adjusts her holdover calculations accordingly, marking the new aiming point in her mental map. At 1100, intelligence confirms Al-Zawahiri is en route to the compound. Expected arrival 1345 hours. Sarah's stomach tightens. 3 hours from now, she will either make history or become a cautionary tale about hubris and failed ambition. Hayes appears beside her position with an encrypted data pad. But before he can speak, a new transmission comes through from higher command. His expression darkens as he reads the classified update. Got new intelligence from national assets. Hayes' voice is tight. The compound. There's a possibility Al-Zawahiri may be wearing explosive vest with dead man switch protocol. Intelligence assesses low probability of activation, but he pauses. I'm being ordered not to disclose this to operational personnel unless I deem it tactically necessary. Sarah's blood runs cold. A dead man switch. Which means if she makes the shot, there could be an explosion. Which means, are there friendlies in the compound? Sarah asks. Afghan National Army has a liaison team coordinating with the warlord. 6 personnel. They're supposed to be in a different building, but Hayes trails off because they both understand. Supposed to be is not the same as definitely are. Sarah watches Hayes wrestle with the decision. He has been ordered not to tell her, but telling her might make her abort the mission. Not telling her might result in dead allies. Sir, I need to know. Can you confirm the ANA location at time of engagement? Hayes meets her eyes. I'll try to get updated positioning data from ISR before you take the shot. But Sarah, this is still the mission. Al-Zawahiri is the target. The explosive risk is assessed as acceptable given target value. Acceptable to who? Sarah asked quietly. To people who don't have to pull the trigger. Hayes' honesty is brutal. I'm following orders by not officially disclosing the dead man switch to you, but I'm also making sure you understand the full tactical picture. What you do with that information is between you and your conscience. He walks away before Sarah can respond, leaving her to calculate not just ballistics but morality. If she makes the shot and kills Al-Zawahiri, there might be an explosion, which might kill Afghan allies. But if she does not make the shot, Al-Zawahiri continues building bombs that kill Americans. The math is no longer simple. The equation now includes variables she cannot measure. At 1300 hours, Sarah begins her final preparation routine. Checks the Barrett's action one more time. Confirms the scope 0 hasn't shifted. Reviews her range card and environmental notes. Runs through breathing exercises designed to slow her heart rate below 50 beats per minute. Danny watches her with the attention of a craftsman studying an apprentice. You're ready, he says quietly. I've trained a lot of shooters over the years. You're as ready as anyone I've seen. Maybe readier than most because you've got the engineering brain to understand the physics instead of just memorizing the formulas. Understanding doesn't mean executing, Sarah replies. Theory and practice are different countries. True, but you've got your father's way. Yeah, that counts for something. Genetics isn't everything, but it sure as hell helps when you're trying to do the impossible. At 1330, Ortega reports movement at the compound. Vehicles arriving, personnel gathering. The meeting is beginning to take shape. At 1347, intelligence confirms Al-Zawahiri's vehicle entering the compound. White Toyota Hilux, 3 occupants, entering through the east gate. Sarah's breathing deepens, heart rate increasing despite her best efforts to control it. This is happening. No more preparation, no more theory. Just her and the rifle and a target that does not yet know he is standing on the threshold of death. At 1355, a figure in white robes emerges onto the rooftop terrace. Danny immediately focuses his spotting scope on the man. "Stand by," Danny says, checking profile against reference photos. Subject is medium height, dark beard, slight limp on right side, consistent with old Soviet wound. High probability this is our target, but cannot confirm without clearer visual. Sarah watches through the Barrett's scope as the figure moves along the terrace, gesturing to someone inside the building. The range is so great that she cannot make out facial features. Just a vertical shape against the brown backdrop, no more human than a number on a page. At 13:58, the figure turns to face roughly in their direction, and Danny sucks in his breath. Positive identification. That is Hamid Al-Zawahiri. Target is confirmed. You are cleared hot. Sarah's world narrows to the crosshairs and the calculations. 3,147 meters translates to 7.2 seconds of flight time. The bullet will drop 152 inches, requiring her to aim more than 12 feet above the target. Wind is currently 15 miles per hour from the west-southwest, meaning drift of approximately 8 feet to the left. Coriolis effect adds 5.1 inches of right deflection. Temperature is 104 degrees Fahrenheit at the firing position, estimated 98 degrees at target elevation. Her aiming point is in empty air 30 feet above and 7 feet to the right of Al-Zawahiri's position. To anyone watching, it would look like she is aiming at nothing, shooting at sky and hope. And somewhere in that compound, 6 Afghan soldiers may or may not be in the blast radius of a bomb she does not know exists but suspects is there. Wind is steady, Danny reports, 15 miles per hour, west-southwest. No significant gusts. Target is stationary. Clear shot. Send it when ready. Sarah's finger finds the trigger. The Barrett is set to break at exactly 3.5 pounds of pressure. She has done this 10,000 times in training, but training targets do not have families, do not have lives that will end when the bullet arrives, do not have names and histories and futures that will be erased in the time it takes physics to work its magic. She thinks about her father in the Iraqi desert, making this same calculation, carrying this same weight, wonders if he hesitated, if he questioned whether the math was right, or if he was playing God from a distance that made it feel clean and surgical when it was anything but. The crosshairs settle. Her breathing stops between heartbeats. The trigger begins its rearward travel under the gentle pressure of her finger. The Barrett roars. Muzzle blast redirects through the brake system in a spectacular display of flame and concussion that kicks up dust in a 20-foot radius. Recoil drives the rifle back against Sarah's shoulder with the force of a sledgehammer, but she rides it smoothly, keeping her eye pressed to the scope to spot her shot's impact. 7.2 seconds feels like 7 hours. The bullet traces an invisible arc through the Afghan sky, climbing to its apex 200 feet above the ground before beginning its descent toward a target that has no idea death is in flight. Wind pushes it left. Gravity pulls it down. The Earth's rotation adds its subtle deflection. Every variable Sarah calculated coming together in a single moment where theory becomes reality. Through the scope, Sarah watches Hamid Al-Zawahiri standing on the rooftop terrace, completely still, facing away from her position. She watches him continue standing for what feels like an eternity, watches him begin to turn towards someone inside the building. And then his chest explodes. The bullet strikes center mass with the finality of divine judgment. Al-Zawahiri does not stagger or cry out or have any final moment of recognition. One instant he is alive, and the next he is meat falling to the terrace floor like a puppet with severed strings. Hit. Danny's voice cracks with something between awe and horror. Confirmed kill. Holy Christ, you actually made it. Sarah remains frozen behind the rifle, eyes still pressed to scope, watching the chaos erupt in the compound below. Men running, weapons raised, searching for a sniper who fired from nearly 2 miles away. None of them looking in the right direction because the distance makes the shot incomprehensible. She has just accomplished something that will be studied in military academies for decades, has just set a record that may stand for generations, has just proven that her father's gift was not unique to him, but something that runs in blood and bone. But before she can process any of that, before she can feel triumph or relief or anything except the numb shock of successful execution, the world erupts in fire. The explosion comes from the compound, massive and sudden, a secondary detonation that collapses an entire section of the building. Smoke and flame billow into the sky, while the sound wave reaches Point Romeo seconds later, a deep concussive thump that Sarah feels in her chest. What the fuck was that? Hayes is on the radio immediately. TOC, what just happened? Did we have air support we didn't know about? The Tactical Operations Center comes back confused and urgent. Negative on air support. That was secondary explosion from target compound. Assessing damage now. Through the scope, Sarah watches the smoke clear enough to see the devastation. The section of building where Al-Zawahiri had been meeting is now a crater. Bodies visible in the rubble, some moving, most not. And among the casualties, she can make out uniforms that are wrong, equipment that is wrong. Those aren't Taliban, Danny says, his voice hollow. Those are Afghan National Army. Those are our allies. Intelligence update comes through Hayes' radio with the kind of urgency that means someone just realized they fucked up catastrophically. Be advised, Al-Zawahiri was wearing a dead man's switch vest. Intelligence assessed low probability of activation protocols. Repeat, target was rigged with fail-safe explosive device. Detonation has resulted in multiple casualties to friendly forces in the compound. Sarah's stomach drops into a void that has no bottom. She made the shot. Perfect execution. Record-breaking precision. And in doing so, she triggered a bomb that just killed the very people they were supposed to be protecting. How many? Hayes demands. How many ANA casualties? Count is ongoing, but initial assessment shows 6 killed, 4 wounded from Afghan National Army forces. Target building is destroyed. Al-Zawahiri confirmed killed, but collateral damage is significant. 6 dead. Sarah's mind cannot process the number. 6 Allied soldiers killed not by enemy action, but by her bullet finding its mark exactly as intended. The math was perfect. The execution was flawless. And the result is 6 coffins that will be filled because she did her job too well. Did you know? Sarah's voice comes out raw. She is still behind the rifle, but no longer aiming at anything. Did anyone know about the dead man's switch? Hayes does not answer immediately, and his silence is answer enough. Intelligence briefed me at 0300 this morning. Classified addendum to the mission parameters. Al-Zawahiri had a history of using fail-safe protocols. Pentagon assessed it as acceptable risk given target value. I was ordered not to disclose to the team to avoid mission abort. The words land like physical blows. Hayes knew there was a bomb, knew that making the shot might kill allies, and he sent Sarah to take it anyway without telling her what pulling the trigger would cost. You sent me in blind. Sarah cannot keep the betrayal out of her voice. You let me think this was about physics and precision when it was about acceptable losses and calculated sacrifice. I followed orders, specialist. Hayes' voice carries the weight of command decisions that offer no good choices. The mission was to eliminate Al-Zawahiri. You accomplished that mission. The collateral damage is tragic, but the target was responsible for 47 American deaths. 6 versus 47. The math is brutal but clear. That's not math. That is rationalizing murder by spreadsheet. Sarah finally pulls her eye away from the scope, looking at Hayes directly. You talk about acceptable risk like those 6 men are statistics instead of people with families and lives and futures you just calculated away. Want to hate someone for it, hate me. But want to hate someone for it, hate me. But Al-Zawahiri is dead and his bomb-making network is disrupted, and tomorrow there will be soldiers who don't die from IEDs because you made that shot. Hold on to that if you need something to justify what just happened. Before Sarah can respond, Danny's voice cuts through the tension. Contact. Enemy forces mobilizing from the compound. Looks like they're trying to extract someone, and they are pissed. Through the spotting scope, Danny tracks movement that makes Sarah's blood run cold. Not a retreat, a deliberate advance. Vehicles mounting up, personnel organizing into assault formations. And leading them, visible even at this distance, a young man wearing Al-Zawahiri's white robes and carrying the kind of rage that transcends tactical planning. Intelligence update. Hayes reports from the radio. Al-Zawahiri's son Rashid was in the compound visiting from Pakistan. 19 years old, top graduate of Haqqani Network Training Program. Highly trained, highly motivated, and he just watched his father die. Ground surveillance indicates approximately 150 Taliban fighters mobilizing for counterattack. They are coming for us. Sarah stares at the scope, at the young man organizing the assault, and realizes with sickening clarity that making the perfect shot was only the beginning. Now comes the part her father tried to warn her about. The part where the bullet's impact ripples outward in ways that cannot be calculated or controlled, where success becomes survival, and the price of pulling the trigger comes due with interest. Point Romeo is 3 kilometers from the nearest reinforcements, and extraction is at least 4 hours away. They have one Barrett with 12 rounds remaining, one M24 with 18 rounds, and 4 soldiers against a force that outnumbers them 30 to 1. The math on that equation is considerably less favorable than the shot Sarah just made. And somewhere in the chaos of the compound, Hamid Al-Zawahiri's son is promising violence and vengeance to anyone who will listen, organizing a response that will turn Sarah's moment of triumph into a desperate fight for survival. The longest confirmed kill in military history, accomplished at exactly 1,400 hours. And the cost of that achievement is about to come calling with a fury that makes ballistics calculations look simple by comparison. The dust from the explosion is still settling when the first Toyota Technical comes into view 2 kilometers away. Sarah watches through the Barrett's scope as the truck bounces across the valley floor. Machine gun mounted in the bed, armed men clinging to the sides like wasps on a nest. Behind it, more vehicles emerge from the compound. Too many to count. Too many to stop. We need to move. Hayes is already on his feet, scanning the ridgeline for alternate positions. This location is compromised. They know where we are, and they're coming in force. Ortega shakes his head without taking his eye from his own scope. Nearest cover is 800 meters north, and it's all open ground. We'd be cut down before we made half that distance. We hold here, or we die running. Sarah's hands are still on the Barrett, still in firing position, but her mind is caught in a loop replaying the explosion. 6 men, light-odd soldiers, dead because her bullet was too accurate. The math that seemed so clean 30 minutes ago now feels like murder, dressed up in tactical necessity. Mackenzie, Danny's voice cuts through her spiral. I need you here. Present tense. Whatever you're feeling about what happened, you deal with it later. Right now, people are depending on you to do what you do best. Sarah blinks, forces herself to focus. Danny is right. Guilt is a luxury she cannot afford when 150 Taliban fighters are organizing to kill everyone on this ridgeline. She made the shot. The consequences are in motion. And now survival depends on making more shots until either extraction arrives or ammunition runs out. Lead vehicle is at 1,800 meters, Sarah reports, settling back behind the rifle. Her training takes over, pushing emotion into a locked room she will have to open later. Range is closing, 1,200 meters, 1,000. At 900 meters, Sarah centers the crosshairs on the Technical's windshield. The vehicle is moving fast over rough terrain, bouncing and swerving. Not an easy shot, but well within the Barrett's capability and her skill set. She leads the target, accounts for movement and wind, and squeezes the trigger. The 50 caliber round punches through the windshield and continues through the driver's torso and out the back of the cab. The Technical swerves violently left and rolls, ejecting fighters like ragdolls. The vehicle behind it brakes hard to avoid collision, creating a bottleneck in the valley below. Good hit, Danny confirms. You just bought us maybe 5 minutes while they reorganize. 5 minutes is not enough. Sarah knows this with the same certainty she knew the ballistics for her record shot. They have one heavy rifle, limited ammunition, and no support. The math says they lose. The only question is how many enemy fighters they take with them before the inevitable. Second vehicle moving to flank west. Ortega calls out, 800 meters in closing. Sarah swings the Barrett to track the new threat. This driver has learned from the first vehicle's mistake, using terrain features for cover, only exposing himself for seconds at a time. She waits for the moment when the Technical clears a rise, leading the target by instinct more than calculation. The shot takes the vehicle through the engine block. Not a kill shot on personnel, but a mobility kill that leaves the truck smoking and useless. Fighters bail out and take cover behind rocks, beginning to return fire with AK-47s that cannot reach Point Romeo's elevation, but make a lot of noise trying. We're being flanked on 3 sides, Hayes reports from his position. They're not just attacking, they're maneuvering. Someone down there knows what they're doing. That would be Hamid Al-Zawahiri. Intelligence comes through on Hayes' radio with an update that makes a bad situation worse. 19 years old, trained by Haqqani Network in small unit tactics. He's not just angry, he's competent. Sarah finds the young man through her scope. Even at this distance, she can see the family resemblance. Same build as his father, same way of moving. But where Hamid Al-Zawahiri had been methodical and cold, his son burns with the kind of fury that makes tactical mistakes. He is exposing himself too much, gesturing too broadly, letting rage override training. I have eyes on Rashid, Sarah says quietly. Clear shot at 740 meters. The question hangs unspoken. Does she take it? Does she kill a 19-year-old boy whose only crime is loving his father and wanting revenge for his death? Or does she let him live and coordinate an attack that will kill her and everyone with her? Take the shot, Hayes orders. He is a combatant leading an assault. Hesitation gets us killed. Sarah's finger finds the trigger but does not press. Something is wrong. Some instinct screaming that this is too easy. Rashid is exposing himself deliberately, standing in the open, making himself a target. He wants her to shoot at him. It's a trap, she says, pulling her eye from the scope to scan the wider battlefield. He's bait. Someone else is making the real play. Danny sees it first. Oh, fuck. Mortar team, Northeast Ridge, 1,000 meters. They're setting up indirect fire. Sarah swings the Barrett hard right and finds the mortar crew through her scope. 3 men positioning a tube that will rain high explosive death on Point Romeo from an angle their cover cannot protect against. If that mortar gets operational, the fight is over. The range is at the limit of what she can reliably hit under pressure. 1,000 meters to a target the size of a man's torso. Wind is gusting. Her heart rate is elevated from adrenaline. The shot is possible but far from guaranteed. She does not have time to second guess, does not have time to calculate every variable. Just has to trust training and instinct and the genetics that made her father capable of the impossible. The Barrett roars. Through the scope, Sarah watches the mortar team leader's head snap back as the bullet finds him. The other 2 men dive for cover, abandoning the mortar tube. Not a permanent solution, but enough to buy time. How many rounds left, Hayes asks. 9, Sarah replies, plus whatever Danny has for the M24. 16, Danny says. 25 rounds total against a force that outnumbers us 6-1 and is getting closer every minute. The math is brutal. Even if every shot is a kill, even if they fight perfectly, the numbers do not favor survival. But Sarah has learned something in the past 30 minutes that her father never taught her. Sometimes the math does not matter. Sometimes you fight because the alternative is accepting death. And accepting death means the people depending on you die too. She settles back into the scope and begins working through targets methodically. 800 meters, fighter moving between rocks. Hit. 700 meters, 2 men trying to set up a heavy machine gun. 2 shots, 2 hits. 600 meters, squad leader coordinating movement over radio. Hit. Each trigger pull is a separate calculation. Each impact is a life ended from a distance that makes it feel clinical. But Sarah can feel something hardening inside her with every shot. Some part of her humanity calcifying under the repeated necessity of dealing death. Her father's warning echoing in memory. The peace of mind that comes from not knowing if you're a good man doing bad things or a bad man pretending to be good. She is 5 rounds into the Barrett's remaining ammunition when Ortega's rifle cracks from her left. The sound is different from the Barrett's thunderous report. Sharper, more intimate. She glances over to see Gunny working his M4 carbine, taking shots at fighters who have gotten close enough that the Barrett is overkill. How close are they? Sarah asks. Too close, Ortega replies. We've got fighters at 300 meters north and west. Another squad moving up the south approach. They're trying to get inside our effective range and rush the position. Hayes is on the radio demanding extraction status and getting answers that make his jaw clench tighter with every exchange. Closest birds are committed to troops in contact in Kajaki. Next available is 90 minutes out, and that's only if they can break free from current tasking. We're on our own until at least 1,600 hours, 90 minutes. Sarah does quick math. 900 meters of ridgeline to defend with 20 rounds of precision ammunition and 3 rifles against 100-plus fighters who are learning from their mistakes and adapting tactics. The numbers say they do not last that long. But the numbers also said a 31-47-meter shot was impossible, and Sarah made it anyway. So perhaps the numbers are not as absolute as they pretend to be. Contact, right, Danny calls out. Technical mounting, another push. 600 meters. Sarah swings the Barrett to engage, but the vehicle is using a depression in the terrain. Only the roof visible. She waits for the driver to commit to the approach. Patience learned from 1,000 hours on shooting ranges. The technical clears the rise, and Sarah's bullet finds the passenger compartment, ending the push permanently. 3 rounds left in the Barrett. Sarah's world has narrowed to the scope, in the breathing, in the trigger. Everything else is noise. The radio chatter about extraction delays, Hayes coordinating fallback positions, Ortega's M4 rattling off controlled pairs. All of it peripheral to the central truth that she is the only thing keeping fighters at a distance where small arms cannot reach. Movement catches her eye through the scope. Not another vehicle or assault team, a single figure walking toward Point Romeo from the valley floor. Walking, not running, not taking cover. Just striding forward with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing he has already won or already accepted death. Hamid Al-Zawahiri has stopped hiding behind his men and is coming to face her directly. Target is exposed at 500 meters, Sarah reports. Single combatant approaching on foot. Positive identification on Hamid Al-Zawahiri. Take him, Hayes orders without hesitation. End this. Sarah centers the crosshairs on the young man's chest. At this range, the shot is trivial. Wind barely matters. Drop is minimal. She could make this shot blind drunk with broken fingers. Has made harder shots in the past hour than this one will ever be. But something makes her pause. Some instinct that if she takes this shot, something fundamental will break that cannot be repaired. Her father killed from distance, and it hollowed him out over decades. Sarah has killed 7 men in the past 90 minutes and can already feel the erosion starting. How many more before she becomes something unrecognizable? How many deaths before the math stops working and the equations collapse into madness? Mackenzie, take the shot. Hayes' voice carries command authority that demands obedience. He's unarmed, Sarah hears herself say. Through the scope, she can see clearly now. No rifle, no pistol, just a man walking toward his death with empty hands. He's coordinating an assault that's going to kill us all. Hayes counters. Armed or not, he is a combatant and a valid target. Take the fucking shot, specialist. Sarah's finger rests on the trigger. Pressure building. The Barrett wants to fire. The mission demands it. Survival requires it. But something deeper. Something inherited from a father who could not live with what he had done. Rebels against the mathematics of acceptable killing. Wait, Danny says suddenly. Something's wrong. He wouldn't just walk into the open unless... The mortar round hits 30 meters from their position before Danny can finish the thought. The explosion is massive, showering Point Romeo with rocks and shrapnel. Sarah keeps her position behind the Barrett, but feels debris patter against her helmet like deadly rain. Second mortar position. Ortega identifies through the smoke. Northwest Ridge. They got a tube operational while we were focused on Rashid. It was a diversion. Sarah understands now with sick clarity. Rashid sacrificed himself as bait, drawing her attention while a second mortar team established firing position. The boy is smarter than his rage suggests, has his father's gift for tactical thinking wrapped in a fury that makes him dangerous beyond his years. Another mortar round impacts closer this time. The shockwave feels like a physical blow. Sarah's ears ring, but she forces herself to scan for the new mortar position, knowing that if she does not silence it, the next round will find them. There. Through the scope, she spots a movement on the northwest ridge. 1,100 meters. The crew is spread out, harder to target than the first team. She has 3 rounds left and needs at least 2 to have any chance of suppressing the mortar before it kills them all. Taking the shot, Sarah announces, settling the crosshairs on the figure operating the mortar tube. The range is challenging. The angle is bad, but the alternative is death in the next 60 seconds. She fires. Misses by inches as the target shifts at the last moment. The crew scatters but does not abandon the tube. They know what Sarah is just realizing. She is almost out of ammunition and they just need to survive her next shot. 2 rounds left in the Barrett. Sarah chambers another, finding a new target. One of the mortar crew is trying to sight the tube for a more accurate shot. She leads him, accounts for wind and elevation, and fires. Hit. The man goes down and the others hesitate, momentarily disorganized. 1 round remaining. And while Sarah has been focused on the mortar team, Rashid has closed the distance. Through the scope, she tracks him back to find the young man now at 300 meters and still advancing. Still unarmed, still walking toward Point Romeo like a man with nothing left to lose. Mortars are re-establishing, Danny reports. You need to take that last shot now or we lose the position. Sarah's mind fractures into impossible calculations. 1 bullet, 2 targets. The mortar team will kill them if not stopped. But Rashid is the tactical brain coordinating everything. Take out the mortar and Rashid directs another team to finish them. Take out Rashid and the mortar obliterates their position in the next 30 seconds. There is no good choice, no clean mathematics that results in survival, just the brutal calculus of triage and acceptable losses. The same calculus that got 6 Afghan soldiers killed this morning when Sarah made her record shot. She has one bullet, and no matter where it goes, people die. I can't make this choice, Sarah says, her voice cracking. The weight of 7 kills and 6 collateral deaths and the accumulated burden of her father's legacy crushing down until she cannot breathe. I don't know who to shoot. Then don't choose, Ortega says from beside her. His voice is calm despite the incoming fire now peppering their position as fighters close to small arms range. Let me make it easy. Gunny stands up from his defensive position and begins walking toward the edge of Point Romeo, rifle in hand but not raised. Walking toward Rashid with the same measured pace the young man is using. 2 warriors approaching each other across 300 meters of Afghan rock, while mortars and machine guns turn the air into lethal chaos. Gunny, get down! Hayes yells, but Ortega does not stop. Does not take cover, just keeps walking toward the confrontation like a man who has already made his peace with whatever comes next. I'm 61 years old with stage 4 cancer, Ortega calls back over his shoulder. Already dead, just haven't stopped moving yet. But you 3 got lives worth living, so I'm gonna solve your math problem the old-fashioned way. Sarah watches through the scope as Ortega closes the distance with Rashid. Watches the young Afghan stop his advance, confused by this new development. The 2 men face each other at 100 meters, both armed, neither firing. Your father was a warrior, Ortega's voice carries across the distance. Died like one too, quick and clean. More mercy than he gave his victims. You want to honor him? Stop sending boys to die for revenge that won't bring him back. Rashid's response is in Pashto, but the anger needs no translation. He raises his radio, calling in the mortar strike that will kill Ortega where he stands. And in that moment, Sarah understands what Gunny has done, has given her a clear target and a clear choice. Not mortar crew or Rashid, not impossible mathematics between 2 forms of death. Just one old soldier making the sacrifice that lets everyone else live. She centers the crosshairs on the radio in Rashid's hand. At 100 meters, it is a target the size of a playing card. Impossible with most rifles. Difficult even with the Barrett. But Sarah has her father's gift and Gunny's faith in one bullet to prove that some shots matter more than the impossible distance they travel. The Barrett's final round leaves the muzzle at 2,800 feet per second. The range is so short that Sarah can track the bullet's impact through the scope, watches it destroy the radio in Rashid's hand, shrapnel lacerating his fingers but not killing him. The young man drops the ruined electronics and stumbles backward, staring at his bleeding hand in shock. Without the radio, the mortar team has no targeting data. Without Rashid's coordination, the assault loses its tactical coherence. And without ammunition, Sarah Mackenzie can do nothing but watch as Ortega closes the final distance to where Rashid stands bleeding and confused. Gunny reaches the young man and they speak in voices too quiet for the radio to catch. Sarah watches through her scope, helpless now, the Barrett empty and useless. Watches Ortega pull something from his pocket, a photograph. Shows it to Rashid. The young man looks at it and his expression changes from rage to something more complex. Whatever Gunny says next makes Rashid nod slowly. The boy turns and begins walking back toward his fighters, holding his wounded hand. Ortega watches him go, then turns and begins the long walk back to Point Romeo. The Taliban fighters watch their leader retreat and slowly, grudgingly, begin falling back themselves. Not routed, not defeated, but accepting that today's fight is over and no amount of martyrdom will change the outcome. What the hell just happened? Hayes demands as Ortega climbs back up the ridgeline, breathing hard from exertion and something more. Showed him a picture of his father. I took in 2003, back when Hamid was just an engineer helping us rebuild irrigation systems before everything went to shit. Told him the man Sarah killed today wasn't the same man I knew back then. That war changes people, and revenge just creates more war. Asked him if he wanted to spend his life trying to kill the Americans who killed his father, or if he wanted to honor his father by being something better than a bomb maker's son. And he just accepted that? Danny's voice carries disbelief. Hell no. Ortega lowers himself behind cover, wincing. Kid told me to go fuck myself in 3 languages, but I also told him his mortar teams would be in Sarah's crosshairs and she doesn't miss. That he could get all his men killed today, or he could regroup and live to fight another time. Survival beat revenge. This time. Sarah stares at the empty Barrett, at the battlefield littered with vehicles and bodies, at the compound in the distance, still smoking from the explosion that killed 6 allies and 1 target. Tries to calculate whether this counts as victory or just delayed defeat. Extraction birds are inbound, Hayes reports from the radio. 10 minutes out, we're going home. Home. The word feels foreign. Sarah has been in Afghanistan for 7 months, but it feels like years. Feels like she left some essential part of herself on this ridgeline, along with the brass casings from 950 caliber rounds that killed 7 men and saved 4 lives and created ripples that will spread across years in ways she cannot predict or control. You did good, Mackenzie. Danny's hand on her shoulder gripped firm, made the longest shot in history, held off a force that should have overrun us, saved our asses with that last round. Your father would be proud. Would he? Sarah cannot keep the bitterness from her voice. Or would he tell me I just bought a ticket to the same hell that killed him? How many years do I get before the ghosts start talking louder than the living? Ortega eases himself down beside her, old knees protesting. Your daddy's hell was Vietnam, different time, different war. You got something he didn't. People who know what you're carrying and won't let you carry it alone. Me, Danny, the captain. We're all living with ghosts. Difference is we talk about it now, get help for it. Don't have to eat our guns in a VA hospital because we're too proud to admit the weight got too heavy. The helicopters appear as black dots against the blue sky, growing larger as they approach Point Romeo. Sarah begins breaking down the Barrett, muscle memory taking over. Each component gets cleaned and stowed with the same precision she used to assemble it this morning, a lifetime ago, before she became the holder of the longest confirmed kill, before she learned that perfect execution has imperfect consequences. The Chinook touches down in a storm of rotor wash and dust. The 4 of them load equipment and themselves into the bird, taking seats among the nylon webbing and hydraulic lines. The helicopter lifts and Point Romeo falls away below them, just another piece of Afghan rock that has watched Americans bleed and leave for 2 decades. Sarah looks out the gunner's window at the valley sliding past, sees the compound where her bullet found its target, sees the ridgeline where Taliban fighters are regrouping around Rashid's leadership, sees the countless villages and fields and mountains that will still be here long after this war ends and new wars begin. The intelligence officer meets them at the landing pad with a folder full of paperwork that needs signing. Confirmation of kills, after action reports, requests for formal recognition of the record shot. Sarah signs everything mechanically, her hand moving independent of conscious thought. Specialist Mackenzie, you're being summoned to Bagram for formal debriefing. The IO's voice is professionally neutral. There will be questions about the civilian casualties and the decision-making process. Standard procedure for any engagement with collateral damage. 6 Allied soldiers are not collateral damage, Sarah says quietly. There's 6 families that need notification, 6 funerals that need planning, 6 holes in the world that my bullet created. The IO has no response to that, just takes the signed paperwork and disappears into the machinery of military bureaucracy that will reduce today's events to statistics and lessons learned slides. Hayes finds Sarah in the transient building area where soldiers wait for flights to larger bases. She is sitting on a cot staring at nothing, the Barrett case beside her like a coffin. Intelligence confirms Al-Zawahiri's network is already fragmenting. Hayes sits down on the opposite cot. Without his leadership, they're scrambling. Estimates suggest you prevented maybe 50 American casualties over the next 6 months. Maybe more. The 6 we lost today versus the 50 we saved. The math is cold but clear. I'm tired of math, Sarah says. Tired of calculating acceptable losses. My father spent 40 years doing that math and it killed him. How long until it kills me? Hayes is quiet for a moment. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of 3 deployments and a dead wife and too many decisions that had no right answer. I knew about the dead man's switch, and I sent you anyway. That's on me, not you. You pulled the trigger, but I loaded the gun with knowledge you didn't have. If there's guilt to carry, I'm carrying it. You just did your job. Did it better than anyone has ever done it. And yeah, there's a cost to that, but there's also value. You're alive. Danny's alive. Gunny's alive. We're going home to fight another day because you made shots that saved us. Hold on to that when the other stuff gets too heavy. The transport to Bagram leaves at 2200 hours. Sarah spends the intervening hours cleaning the Barrett one more time, writing letters she will never send, trying to sleep and failing. At 2100, Ortega finds her outside the transient billets, smoking a cigarette he bummed off a Marine. Thought you quit, Sarah says. Did quit. 17 years ago. Ortega takes a long drag. But I got maybe 6 months left before the cancer finishes what shrapnel and bullets couldn't. Figure I'm owed a few vices before the end. They stand in silence, watching the stars emerge over Afghanistan. The same stars her father saw in Vietnam. The same stars that will shine over this country long after both wars are forgotten by everyone except the people who fought them. That picture you showed Rashid, what did his father look like before the war changed him? Young, idealistic. Ortega flicks ash into the darkness. Hamid Al-Zawahiri was trying to rebuild his country back then, wanted to bring engineering knowledge from MIT back to Afghanistan and fix infrastructure the Soviets destroyed. Then we invaded and everything went to hell, and he chose a side. Wrong side from our perspective. But in his mind, probably thought he was defending his home against invaders. War makes enemies out of people who might have been allies in a different world. Sarah thinks about this, thinks about the bullet that traveled 3147 meters to kill a man who was once an engineer like her. Wonders what choices led him from building irrigation systems to building bombs. Wonders if she is on a similar trajectory, from shooting paper targets to shooting people. The distance between the two, measured in justifications and rationalizations that make less sense with every trigger pull. Your daddy left you a letter, Ortega says. But he also left you something else. Left you the choice to be better than he was. To learn from his mistakes instead of repeating them. You made the shot today because it needed making. But you also stopped before it became easy. Hesitated before shooting Rashid because something in you recognized the cost. That hesitation, that's your humanity fighting back. Don't lose that. Don't let the math kill the part of you that questions whether the equation is worth solving. The helicopter arrives to take her to Bagram. Sarah shoulders her gear in the Barrett case and climbs aboard. Looks back one last time at Forward Operating Base Wilson, at the plywood structures and concrete barriers that have been home for 7 months. Wonders if she will ever feel at home anywhere again, or if that record shot marked the end of the person she was and the beginning of someone she does not yet recognize. The bird lifts into the night sky and Afghanistan falls away below. Tomorrow there will be debriefings and investigations and probably a court-martial for someone. Tomorrow she will have to answer questions about the 6 Allied soldiers and defend decisions she is not sure she believes in herself. But tonight, suspended between earth and stars, Sarah Mackenzie allows herself to feel the weight of what she has done and what it cost. Allows herself to mourn not just the dead, but the part of herself that died on Point Romeo when theory became practice and mathematics became blood. Her father made a shot at 2847 meters and it followed him home. Sarah exceeded that distance by 300 meters. The question now is whether she has the strength to carry the burden better than he did, or whether some distances are too far to return from, no matter how perfect the shot. Bagram Air Base feels like a different planet from the forward operating bases Sarah has called home for 7 months. There are actual buildings here instead of plywood boxes. Coffee that does not taste like diesel. Soldiers who shower daily and walk around without the 1,000-yard stare that comes from living outside the wire. It should feel like civilization, but to Sarah it feels like being a ghost haunting a world she no longer belongs to. The debriefing room is sterile and cold. Fluorescent lights hum overhead with the frequency that makes her temples ache. 3 officers sit behind a folding table covered in manila folders and that contain every detail of the mission that made her famous and infamous in the same moment. Captain Hayes sits to her left, called as a witness. Danny Reeves is somewhere in the building going through his own medical evaluation for discharge. Ortega is being treated for shrapnel wounds he never mentioned during the extraction. Specialist Sarah Mackenzie. The officer in the center speaks first. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Stern, Army Judge Advocate General Corps. His uniform is crisp in a way that speaks of rear echelon duty and climate-controlled offices. You are here to provide testimony regarding the engagement on October 14th in the Sangin Valley that resulted in the death of high-value target Hamid Al-Zawahiri and 6 Afghan National Army personnel. This is not a court-martial. This is an inquiry to determine facts and assess whether further action is warranted. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Sarah's voice sounds hollow to her own ears. She has not slept in 36 hours, has not eaten anything she could keep down. The nightmare started on the helicopter ride to Bagram and have not stopped. 6 faces she never saw in life, but cannot escape in sleep. Lieutenant Colonel Stern opens the first folder. Walk me through your decision-making process when you took the shot at 1400 hours on October 14th. You were aware of the extreme distance involved. You were aware this would be a record-breaking engagement if successful. What made you confident you could make the shot? Sarah thinks about her father on a rooftop in Hugh, thinks about Gunny's stories and Danny's spotting, and the weight of legacy pressing down until saying no felt like betraying everyone who ever believed in her. I had studied the ballistics extensively, sir. Had my father's genetics for long-range shooting. Had the best equipment in favorable conditions. The math said it was possible. My training said I could execute it. And you were aware that the target was a high-value individual responsible for 47 coalition deaths? Yes, sir. I was briefed on Hamid Al-Zawahiri's network and the threat he posed to our forces and Afghan civilians. Stern makes a note in his folder. Were you also briefed on the possibility that the target might be wearing or accompanied by explosive devices with dead man switch protocols? Sarah feels Captain Hayes tense beside her. This is the question that will determine whether she takes the fall or whether command shares the burden. No, sir. I was not briefed on that possibility until after the shot when the explosion occurred. Lieutenant Colonel Stern's expression does not change, but something shifts in the room's atmosphere. He turns his attention to Hayes. Captain Hayes, according to mission logs, you received a classified addendum to the operation order at 0300 on October 14th. This addendum contained intelligence assessment regarding Al-Zawahiri's known use of fail-safe explosive devices. Is that correct? Hayes meets Stern's gaze without flinching. Yes, sir. I received that information approximately 5 hours before the mission commenced. And you did not share this intelligence with your sniper? I did not, sir. The addendum was classified and I was instructed by Pentagon liaison that disclosure to operational personnel was not authorized unless mission commander deemed it tactically necessary. Did you deem it tactically necessary? The silence stretches for 3 heartbeats. Sarah watches Hayes wrestle with the impossible choice between defending his decision and admitting he sent her blind into a situation that killed 6 allies. I deemed it strategically necessary to eliminate Al-Zawahiri regardless of the explosive risk, Hayes says carefully. The target's bomb-making network was responsible for ongoing coalition casualties. Intelligence assessed that the dead man's switch would likely only affect the immediate compound area. Afghan National Army personnel were not supposed to be in the blast radius at time of engagement, but they were, Stern states flatly. 6 soldiers, men with families, men who were our allies, dead because your sniper made a perfect shot that triggered a bomb she did not know existed. Hayes' jaw tightens, but he does not look away. That is correct, sir. The intelligence was faulty. The ANA moved into the compound between the time I received the addendum and the time Specialist Mackenzie took her shot. If there is culpability for those deaths, it rests with me, not with her. Sarah wants to object, wants to shoulder some of the burden, but military justice does not work that way. Hayes gave the order. Hayes had the intelligence. Hayes owns the outcome regardless of how impossible his position was. Stern turns back to Sarah. Specialist Mackenzie, after the primary engagement, you participated in a defensive action that lasted approximately 90 minutes against numerically superior Taliban forces. During this engagement, you expended 9 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition. Intelligence reports confirmed 7 enemy killed by your fire. Is this accurate? Yes, sir. Sarah's throat is dry. 7 confirmed, possibly more from vehicle destruction, but I only counted direct personnel kills. And during this engagement, you held fire on Rashid Al-Zawahiri, the 19-year-old son of your primary target, despite having a clear shot and direct orders from Captain Hayes to engage. Wait, the question lands like a punch. Sarah has asked herself the same thing 100 times since Point Romeo, has tried to understand why her finger froze on the trigger when everything logical demanded she take the shot. He was unarmed, sir, walking toward our position with no weapon. It felt like murder rather than combat engagement. He was coordinating an assault via radio that was attempting to kill you and your team, Stern counters. He was a valid military target regardless of whether he personally carried a rifle. Your hesitation put American lives at risk. My hesitation gave Command Sergeant Major Ortega the opportunity to negotiate a tactical withdrawal that saved American lives, Sarah replies, surprised by the steel in her own voice. If I had killed Rashid, his fighters would have pressed the assault to martyrdom. Gunny's actions de-escalated the situation, My restraint made that possible. Stern considers this. Makes another note. Tell me about the final round you fired from the Barrett M107. Intelligence reports indicate you shot a radio out of Hamid Al-Zawahiri's hand at approximately 100 meters. That is an extremely precise shot under combat stress. What was your intent? My intent was to stop him from calling in mortar fire that would have killed Command Sergeant Major Ortega and provided targeting data for our position. The radio was the immediate threat. Destroying it eliminated the threat without taking a life. So you intentionally aimed for equipment rather than personnel? Yes, sir. Under direct orders to engage the target himself? Sarah hesitates because this is where the line between following orders and following conscience becomes impossible to navigate. Yes, sir. I disobeyed Captain Hayes' order to kill Rashid and instead chose a solution that achieved the tactical objective without adding an 18th kill to my record. The room goes quiet except for the fluorescent lights humming their headache frequency. Sarah has just admitted to disobeying a direct order in combat. The kind of admission that ends careers and sometimes results in prison time depending on how the chain of command decides to interpret events. Lieutenant Colonel Stern closes his folder and leans back in his chair. He looks tired in a way that has nothing to do with lack of sleep and everything to do with trying to apply regulations to situations where regulations were never designed to apply. Specialist Mackenzie, you are officially credited with the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history. 3,147 meters. This achievement will likely stand for decades. You are also partially responsible for 6 Allied deaths through the unintended consequences of that shot. You disobeyed orders during a combat engagement, and you showed restraint that possibly saved American lives, but definitely put them at risk. I am trying to determine whether you are a hero or a liability. Sarah thinks about her father's letter, about the question he lived with for 40 years. Good man doing bad things or bad man pretending to be good. Realizes that maybe the answer is neither. Maybe the answer is just a human trying to make impossible choices in situations designed to have no right answers. I'm just a soldier, sir, trying to do my job and live with the consequences. Some days that means pulling the trigger. Some days it means not pulling it. I don't know if that makes me a hero or a liability, but I know I can live with the choices I made on Point Romeo, and I couldn't live with some of the choices I didn't make. Stern studies her for a long moment. Then he stands, gathering his folders. This inquiry is concluded. My recommendations will be forwarded to the commanding general within 48 hours. You are restricted to base pending those recommendations. Dismissed. Sarah and Hayes exit the debriefing room into a hallway that smells like industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Neither speaks until they are outside in the October sun that feels too bright after the fluorescent prison. That could have gone worse, Hayes says finally. You admitted to disobeying orders, but framed it as tactical judgment. Might save you from a court-martial. Will it save you, sir? Sarah asks. You're the one who withheld intelligence. You're the one command will hold responsible for 6 dead allies. Hayes lights a cigarette with hands that are steadier than they should be. I've been responsible for dead soldiers before. Comes with the rank. But these 6. He pauses, smoke drifting across his face like the ghosts he is trying not to see. These 6 I could have prevented. If I'd told you about the dead man's switch, you might have chosen not to take the shot. Or you might have taken it anyway and it's just been prepared for the consequences. But I took that choice away from you. Made the decision myself. That's on me. You were following orders, sir. Pentagon said don't disclose. Pentagon wasn't on Point Romeo. Hayes drops the cigarette and grinds it under his boot. I was. I saw your face when that compound exploded. Saw you realize what happened. That's an image I'm taking home with me, along with 6 flag-draped coffins that have my name on them in ways that matter more than whatever the inquiry recommends. They find Danny Reeves in the medical holding area, arm in a sling from shrapnel wounds Sarah had not noticed during the extraction. His hands are wrapped in bandages that hide the tremors but cannot hide the diagnosis that will end his career. Medical board confirmed it, Danny says without preamble. Early-stage Parkinson's disease. Progressive and irreversible. Honorable discharge with full medical benefits. 30 years in the Army, and I'm done by Christmas. I'm sorry, Sarah says, meaning it. You earned better than a medical discharge. Better than a dishonorable discharge for fraudulent enlistment, Danny counters. Hayes pulled strings to make this honorable. Got me full pension, full VA benefits, everything my family needs. Could have thrown me under the bus for hiding my condition. Instead, he protected me. He protected all of us, Sarah says, and now he's going to pay the price for it. That's what leaders do, a new voice interrupts. Command Sergeant Major Ortega appears in the doorway, moving carefully from the stitches, holding his torso together. They take the hits so their people can survive. Hayes is good at it, almost as good as your father was. The four of them stand in uncomfortable silence, bound together by what happened on Point Romeo in ways that will never fully translate to people who were not there. A sniper, a spotter, a commander, and a dying sergeant major who sacrificed himself to a tactical problem that had no clean solution. Got something for you, Sarah. Ortega pulls a small package from his pocket, wrapped in brown paper and tied with string that has seen better wars. Your father gave this to me and Hugh, February '68, right after he made that shot. Said if anything happened to him, I should give it to his family. When he died in '08, I held on to it. Figured you'd need it someday when you understood what he carried. Sarah unwraps the package with hands that want to shake but will not let themselves. Inside is a small notebook, the kind soldiers used to carry before everything went digital. Her father's handwriting fills the pages. Not tactical notes or range cards. Something else. It's his journal, Ortega explains. From Vietnam. Started it after Huey. Every shot he made, he wrote down. Not the distance or the conditions. The cost. What it took from him each time. Read it when you're ready, not before. Sarah holds the notebook like it might explode. Her father's accounting of 40 years of ghosts. The math he could not solve. The weight that eventually killed him. Gunny, I don't know if I want to know what's in here. I'm already carrying enough. Then you're exactly ready enough, Ortega says, because your father's mistake wasn't carrying the weight. It was carrying it alone. He never told anyone, never asked for help, never admitted that some burdens are too heavy for one person. You got us, got Hayes and Danny, and a whole system now that understands PTSD isn't weakness, it's reality. Use it, don't make his mistakes. The notebook goes into Sarah's cargo pocket, a weight measured in ounces that feels heavier than the Barrett ever did. 3 days pass in a blur of waiting. Sarah is confined to the transient billeting area at Bagram, not under arrest but not free either. She tries to read her father's journal and cannot get past the first entry. February 12th, 1968. Made the shot. Killed a man I never met from so far away he never knew I existed. Saved 200 Marines. Cost me something I can't name. First payment on a debt I'll be making installments on for the rest of my life. The handwriting is young, optimistic, despite the dark words. Her father at 22, just beginning to understand what he had signed up for. Sarah is 29 and feels ancient. On the fourth day, Lieutenant Colonel Stern summons her back to the debriefing room. Hayes is already there, along with a general Sarah does not recognize. The stars on his collar mark him as someone whose decisions have permanent consequences. Specialist Mackenzie, reporting as ordered, sir. Sarah stands at attention, prepared for court-martial notification or dishonorable discharge or whatever punishment has been decided for the impossible choices she made. At ease. The general's voice is rough, weathered by too many deployments. I'm Brigadier General Marcus Webb, Commanding General of Task Force Kandahar. I've reviewed Lieutenant Colonel Stern's inquiry report and all supporting documentation regarding the engagement on October 14th. I've also reviewed your service record, your training scores, and the tactical situation you faced on Point Romeo. Sarah waits because generals do not summon specialists to deliver good news. The death of 6 Afghan National Army personnel is a tragedy. Full stop. No qualifications, no acceptable losses calculations. 6 men died and their families deserve better than bureaucratic explanations. However, after reviewing the intelligence failures and command decisions that led to those deaths, I am satisfied that you, Specialist Mackenzie, bear no criminal or professional culpability. You executed the mission you were assigned based on the information you were provided. The failures were systemic, not individual. Sarah feels something unknot in her chest, but cannot bring herself to feel relief when 6 men are still dead. General Webb continues. Captain Hayes has been issued a letter of reprimand for failure to disclose critical intelligence to his operational personnel. This letter will remain in his personnel file and will likely affect future promotion opportunities. However, given the classified nature of the intelligence and the conflicting guidance he received from higher command, I am not pursuing court-martial. He will retain his rank and his command, with the understanding that future failures of this nature will not be treated as leniently. Hayes accepts this judgment with the same stoicism he brought to every other impossible decision. Yes, sir. Understood, sir. As for you, Specialist Mackenzie, the general turns his full attention to Sarah, and she understands why men follow him into combat. His eyes see through excuses and bullshit straight into whatever truth a person is trying to hide. You made a shot that will be studied in sniper schools for generations. You held a defensive position against overwhelming odds, and you showed restraint when easier men would have just kept killing. Those are the actions of a superior soldier. He pauses, letting the weight of that assessment settle. However, you also disobeyed a direct order from your commanding officer during combat operations. Regardless of the outcome, regardless of whether your judgment proved tactically sound, that is a violation of military discipline that cannot be overlooked. Under normal circumstances, that would result in non-judicial punishment at minimum. Here it comes, Sarah thinks, the hammer falling despite the praise. But these are not normal circumstances. General Webb opens a different folder, this one containing photographs. The first image shows Hamid Al-Zawahiri, bandaged hand, standing with tribal elders. The second shows Taliban fighters withdrawing from Point Romeo. The third shows something Sarah never expected to see. Rashid speaking with Afghan government officials under a white flag. Your restraint in not killing Hamid Al-Zawahiri has had unexpected consequences. Intelligence reports that he has opened channels with Afghan government mediators. His father's death and his own near-death experience have apparently convinced him that martyrdom is less appealing than negotiation. He is providing information on his father's bomb-making network in exchange for amnesty and assistance relocating to a third country. Information that has already led to the disruption of 3 IED manufacturing cells. Sarah stares at the photographs, trying to reconcile the young man she had in her crosshairs with the person negotiating peace. Your disobedience, General Webb says, was something that might be approval, has resulted in intelligence gains that exceed the tactical value of killing one more Taliban fighter. Command Sergeant Major Ortega's negotiation, enabled by your restraint, has created an outcome none of us predicted, but all of us can appreciate. So what happens to me, sir? Sarah asks, still unable to believe this is heading anywhere positive. You are being promoted to sergeant effective immediately. You are being transferred to the Army Marksmanship Unit at Fort Benning to serve as an instructor. And you are being recommended for the Bronze Star with Valor for your actions during the defensive engagement on Point Romeo. General Webb closes the folder. The Army needs shooters like you, Sergeant Mackenzie. But more importantly, we need soldiers who understand when not to shoot. That's a skill we can't train. It's something you either have or you don't. You have it. Sarah's mind reels. Promoted, transferred, decorated, all the things that should feel like victory but somehow feel like surviving a car crash. Grateful to be alive but aware that the wreckage is still smoldering. What about the 6 ANA soldiers, sir? Their families? Already being addressed, General Webb replies. Full death benefits, memorial services, financial compensation. It doesn't bring them back, but it acknowledges their sacrifice. And Sergeant Mackenzie? Their deaths are not your burden to carry alone. That weight gets distributed across the entire chain of command that puts you in that position. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The meeting ends with salutes and paperwork and the machinery of military bureaucracy converting tragedy into statistics. Sarah walks out of the building into afternoon sun that feels warmer than it should for October in Afghanistan. Hayes catches up with her at the transient billets. Fort Benning is a good assignment, teaching the next generation. Passing on what you've learned. Your father would have liked that. Will you be okay, sir? The reprimand in your file? Hayes shrugs with the resignation of a man who has made peace with consequences. I've got 3 deployments, a silver star, and a dead wife. One letter of reprimand isn't going to define my career. Besides, I earned it. Made a choice that got people killed, that I have to live with whether the Army punishes me or not. They stand in silence, 2 soldiers bound by shared experience that civilians will never fully understand. The nightmares will get worse before they get better, Hayes says quietly. The faces you can't stop seeing. The what-ifs that loop in your head at 3 a.m. I've been there, still am most nights. But there are people who can help, counselors who specialize in this. Don't wait until it breaks you like it broke your father. How do you live with it, sir? Knowing people died because of your decisions? Hayes looks at the mountains in the distance, at the country that has taken so much from so many for so long. You find something worth protecting, something that makes the cost meaningful. For me, it was making sure other commanders learned from my mistakes, kept better men from having to make the same impossible choices. For you, maybe it's teaching shooters to think before they pull the trigger, making sure the next generation understands that every shot has a price and you pay in installments for the rest of your life. Sarah thinks about her father's journal in her pocket, 40 years of installment payments that eventually bankrupted his soul. Wonders if she has the strength to make those same payments and remain solvent, or if the debt will compound until she follows him into whatever dark place he could not escape from. Danny finds her that evening at the coffee shop that serves something approximating civilian quality. His hands are steady for once, medication finally calibrated correctly. Heading home next week, medical discharge is finalized. Danny's voice carries relief and sadness in equal measure. Jennifer's got a full scholarship to Virginia Tech. Amy made the honor roll. Maria says the house feels empty without me, but in a good way. Like there's room for me to fill instead of just space I'm occupying between deployments. That's good, Danny. You earned it. 30 years. You deserve to go home. We all deserve to go home, Danny replies. Question is whether home will recognize us when we get there. I've been a soldier longer than I've been anything else. Don't know how to be a civilian. Don't know how to be a father who's present instead of deployed. Going to have to learn a whole new skill set. Sarah understands this intimately. She has been preparing for war since her father first put a rifle in her hands, has shaped her entire identity around being a shooter. What happens when the shooting stops? Who is she when she is not calculating wind drift and bullet drop? Teach me something, she says suddenly. Something about being a spotter, about reading people instead of just targets. Danny considers this. Best spotter skill isn't about wind calls or range estimation. It's about knowing when your shooter is compromised, when they're too angry or too scared or too cocky to make the shot clean. Your job as a spotter is to pull them back from the edge, tell them to wait, let the moment pass. Sometimes the best shot is the one you don't take. Like Rashid. Danny nods. I saw you hesitate, saw you fighting with yourself about pulling that trigger. And I realized you were doing the math that matters, not ballistics, morality, whether adding one more kill was worth what it would cost you. That's when I knew you were going to be better than me, better than most of us, because you asked the hard questions before the bullet flies. The next morning, Sarah finally reads her father's journal. All of it. Every entry from Hugh in 1968 to the final entry dated 3 days before his death in 2008. 40 years of accounting, 40 years of names he never knew and faces he could not forget. The last entry stops her cold. Sarah is trying out for the Olympics next month. She doesn't know I'm sick, doesn't know the cancer is from Agent Orange, and the doctors give me maybe 6 months. She thinks I'm proud of her shooting. And I am, but I'm also terrified. Terrified she'll be as good as me. Terrified she'll follow this path and end up where I am, carrying ghosts that never get lighter. If I could stop her, I would. But she has the gift and the drive and trying to cage that would destroy her just as surely as letting it fly free. So I'm taking the coward's way out, going to make it look like the cancer won instead of admitting I can't carry this anymore. Give her the hero father instead of the broken man. Maybe that's enough. Maybe she'll be strong enough to carry what I couldn't. God, I hope so. Because this weight, it never gets lighter. You just get used to bending under it until one day you realize you can't straighten up anymore. I love you, baby girl. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger. Your father, Jack. Sarah reads the entry 3 times. Her father did not die from Agent Orange, did not die from PTSD, died from trying to protect her from the truth about what being a shooter costs, died giving her a mythology instead of a warning. And now she has exceeded his record and inherited his burden. And the question is whether she makes the same choice 40 years from now or whether she finds a different way forward. Ortega finds her on the flight line where cargo planes taxi in eternal rotation. He moves slowly, cancer and shrapnel both taking their toll. Read it? Gunny asks, not needing to specify what he means. All of it. Sarah's voice is rough from crying she will not admit to. He killed himself to give me a hero to honor instead of a broken man to mourn. He killed himself because he didn't know there was another option. Ortega settles onto a concrete barrier with a grimace. Your father came home from Vietnam when PTSD was still called shell shock, and the only treatment was to drink it away or tough it out. He didn't have the resources you have, didn't have a system that understands this shit is real and treatable. He just had ghosts and silence, and 40 years of pretending he was fine when he was dying inside. I'm afraid I'll end up the same way. Sarah admits what she has been too terrified to say out loud. Afraid the math doesn't work, that no matter how many people I save, the ones I kill will outweigh them. That 40 years from now, I'll be writing the same journal entries and looking for the same way out. Then don't carry it alone. Ortega's voice is firm despite his failing body. You got Hayes who understands command guilt. Got Danny who understands the weight of the rifle. Got me for however long the cancer gives me. And you got a whole generation of soldiers after you who are going to need someone to teach them that killing takes a toll even when it's justified. Be that teacher. Make your father's pain mean something by preventing it in others. The cargo plane lifts off, engines screaming, carrying supplies to forward bases where other soldiers are making other impossible choices. Sarah watches it climb into the sky and thinks about distance. Her father traveled 2,847 meters from shooter to target and could not travel the 12 inches from his head to his heart to admit he needed help. Sarah traveled 3,147 meters to make her shot. The question now is whether she can travel the much shorter but infinitely harder distance from what she has done to who she wants to become. 2 weeks later, she boards a transport to Germany and then to the United States. The Barrett travels in a case marked with her name and the record that will define her whether she wants it to or not. 3,147 meters. The longest confirmed kill. The shot that saved lives and cost lives and changed Sarah Mackenzie from a soldier trying to honor her father into a woman trying to survive what honoring him required. Fort Benning waits. Students wait. A future waits that is different from anything she imagined when she enlisted to use her father's gift. But first, she has to survive the flight home. Has to survive the nightmares that come every time she closes her eyes. Has to survive the weight of 9 trigger pulls and 7 confirmed kills and 6 collateral deaths and 1 young man she chose not to kill who might be the most important decision she ever made. The plane climbs through 30,000 feet and Sarah stares out the window at clouds that hide the ground below. Thinks about distance and debt and the installment payments her father made for 40 years. Thinks about whether she has the strength to make those payments without going bankrupt like he did. And she thinks about Hamid Al-Zawahiri, 19 years old with a bandaged hand, choosing negotiation over martyrdom because one American soldier chose restraint over revenge. Maybe that is the math that matters. Not how many you kill, but how many you save by choosing when not to pull the trigger. It is not an answer, but it is enough to get her through this flight, and tomorrow, and maybe the day after that. One day at a time, one shot at a time, one choice at a time between the person she was and the person she is trying to become. The distance between those two people is measured in more than meters. But Sarah Mackenzie has proven she can make impossible shots. Now she just has to prove she can survive them. Fort Benning, Georgia smells like pine trees and gunpowder. Sergeant Sarah Mackenzie stands in front of a classroom filled with 14 soldiers who want to learn how to kill people from distances that make it feel like mathematics instead of murder. She knows what they do not yet understand, that every equation has a human cost and you pay in installments for the rest of your life. The Barrett M107 that made her famous sits mounted on the wall behind her desk, encased in glass like a museum piece. A plaque underneath reads, "Used by Sergeant Sarah Mackenzie to achieve longest confirmed sniper kill in military history, 3,147 meters, Sangin Valley, Afghanistan, October 14, 2012. The plaque does not mention the 6 Afghan soldiers who died when her perfect shot triggered a bomb, does not mention the 7 Taliban fighters she killed during the siege that followed, does not mention that making history cost her something she is still learning to live without. It has been 6 months since Afghanistan, 6 months since the court of inquiry, 6 months since she read her father's final journal entry and understood that he killed himself trying to protect her from a truth she would eventually learn anyway. The nightmares have not stopped, but they have evolved. Now, instead of seeing faces of the dead, she sees her father on that VA hospital bed making the choice that orphaned her because he thought dying a hero was better than living as a broken man. The mathematics of long-range shooting are not complicated. Sarah's voice carries the authority of someone who has done the impossible and survived to teach it. Bullet drop, wind drift, Coriolis effect, temperature gradients. These are all calculable variables. You put in the numbers, you get an answer. The hard part is not the math. The hard part is living with what the math requires. The students take notes on laptops and tablets, a different generation from her father's, a different war from Vietnam. But the same fundamental truth. Someone has to pull the trigger, and pulling the trigger changes you in ways that cannot be calculated or predicted. One student raises her hand. Private First Class Jessica Reeves, 22 years old, daughter of Sergeant Major Daniel Reeves, who served with Sarah in Afghanistan. Danny asked Sarah to keep an eye on his daughter when Jessica enlisted despite his objections. Said she joined because she wanted to honor what he sacrificed. Sarah sees Danny in Jessica's face. The same determination, the same need to prove something. Sergeant Mackenzie, Jessica asks, how do you know when not to take the shot? The question stops Sarah mid-sentence because it is the only question that matters and the one she is still learning to answer. The classroom goes quiet. 13 other students lean forward because they understand this is not about ballistics anymore. This is about something deeper. You know when the cost of taking the shot exceeds the value of the target. Sarah sets down the laser pointer she has been using to illustrate wind patterns. But calculating that cost is not something you can do from behind a scope. You have to do it here. She taps her chest. Before you put your eye to the optic, before you settle your breathing, before your finger finds the trigger, you have to ask yourself if you can live with what comes after. One of the male students, a cocky Ranger qualified sergeant who thinks he already knows everything, speaks up without raising his hand. But if you hesitate, the target escapes. People die because you didn't take the shot you had. True. Sarah meets his eyes directly. People also die because you took a shot without understanding the full consequences. I killed a man from over 3,000 meters away. Perfect execution, record-breaking precision, and in doing so, I triggered an explosion that killed 6 Allied soldiers. The math said take the shot. The result said the math was incomplete. The classroom absorbs this. Sarah can see them processing the idea that being the best shooter in the world does not guarantee making the right choice. That excellence in execution can still produce tragic outcomes. After class, Jessica Reeves approaches the desk while other students file out discussing ballistic coefficients and Scope 0 procedures. My father told me what happened on Point Romeo. Jessica's voice is quiet, private. Told me about his Parkinson's disease and how you took the shot he couldn't make. Said you saved his life and gave him the chance to come home with honor instead of shame. Danny saved his own life by being honest about what he could no longer do. Sarah straightens papers that do not need straightening. I just pulled a trigger. He made the hard choice. He also told me about Command Sergeant Major Ortega, about how Gunny walked toward an enemy fighter to give you a clear shot, about how you chose to shoot a radio instead of a person. Jessica pauses, choosing her words carefully. My dad said that's the difference between a shooter and a sniper. Shooter just follows the math. Sniper understands that some equations have variables you can't measure until after you've solved them. Sarah thinks about Gunny. They exchange emails every few weeks. His cancer is progressing faster than doctors predicted. 6 months has become maybe 3. But his last message was characteristically blunt. Dying is easy, Mackenzie. Living with what you've done is the hard part. Don't waste the time I'm giving up by second-guessing choices you made for the right reasons. Your father is a good man, Sarah tells Jessica. Better than he gives himself credit for. Learn from him. Not just the shooting, the knowing when to stop. Jessica nods and leaves, and Sarah is alone with the Barrett on the wall and the ghosts that are always present but less oppressive than they used to be. Therapy helps. The VA counselor specializes in combat trauma and does not judge when Sarah describes the nightmares or the guilt or the fear that she is following her father's path toward the same dark conclusion. Instead, the counselor teaches her tools, breathing exercises, cognitive reframing, ways to carry the weight without letting it crush her. But the most effective therapy is teaching. Every student she trains to think before shooting. Every soldier she convinces that restraint is strength, not weakness. Every life potentially saved because someone learned that the best shot is often the one you do not take. These are the installment payments on the debt her father could not afford. These are how she makes his sacrifice mean something beyond just a cautionary tale about PTSD in veteran suicide. 3 months into her assignment at Fort Benning, Captain Derek Hayes visits. He is no longer Captain Hayes. The letter of reprimand derailed his promotion to major, and he took early retirement rather than serve out his career under that cloud. Now he works as a defense contractor, teaching tactical planning to foreign military forces. The job pays better and the guilt follows him just the same. They meet at a barbecue place off post where soldiers and civilians mix without the rigid hierarchy of rank. Hayes looks older than he should at 33, the weight of 6 dead Afghan soldiers visible in the lines around his eyes. "How are you adjusting to civilian life?" Sarah asks, though she knows the answer from his posture. Hayes is a soldier without a uniform, adrift in a world that does not operate on the clear principles of military order. "I'm not," Hayes admits. "Wake up at 0500 every morning out of habit. Can't break the routine. Spend my days teaching officers from countries I've never heard of how to plan operations I'll never execute. Go home to an empty apartment because dating feels impossible when you're still married to ghosts." Sarah understands this intimately, has tried dating since returning stateside, has gone to dinners with men who ask what she does and cannot comprehend when she explains, has learned that saying you hold the record for longest confirmed sniper kill is either a conversation ender or an invitation for questions she does not want to answer. Most people cannot reconcile the idea that the woman across the table has killed 7 men, that she carries those deaths with her to movies and restaurants and the grocery store. "Have you talked to anyone?" Sarah asks. "Professional help?" "Tried." Hayes rotates his beer bottle, watching a condensation pool on the table. VA assigned me a therapist who thanked me for my service and asked how I felt about killing people. Like I'm supposed to have some profound emotional revelation that makes 6 dead allies acceptable because I was following orders. That's not therapy, that's checking a box. Sarah's counselor taught her to recognize the difference. Good therapy asks what you need to survive what you've experienced, not what you feel about it. "What I need is a time machine," Hayes says quietly. "Need to go back to 0300 on October 14th and make a different choice. Tell you about the dead man's switch. Let you decide if the shot was worth the risk. But I can't do that. So instead, I'm teaching Moroccan lieutenants about tactical air support while 6 families in Afghanistan bury soldiers who died because I withheld intelligence. Those families also buried them with honors and benefits because you fought to make sure they were recognized." Sarah has learned that guilt unexamined becomes a spiral. You owned your mistake, took responsibility. That's more than a lot of commanders do. Doesn't bring them back. No, nothing brings them back. But beating yourself up for the rest of your life doesn't honor them either. It just creates a 7th casualty. Hayes considers this, takes a long drink of beer. "You sound like someone who's done a lot of therapy. Twice a week since January." Sarah traces patterns in the condensation on her own bottle, learning that my father's suicide wasn't about weakness, was about a generation that didn't have the resources we have now. That PTSD is an injury, not a character flaw. That asking for help is strength, not failure. Is it working, the therapy? Some days. Sarah's honesty is hard-won. Other days, I still wake up at 3 a.m. seeing 6 faces I never met. Still calculate whether I should have refused the shot. Still wonder if I'm going to end up writing a final journal entry like my father did. But I'm learning that wondering isn't the same as inevitability. That I get to choose a different ending if I'm willing to work for it. They finish their beers in companionable silence. 2 soldiers learning to be human again. Neither finding it easy, both refusing to quit trying. 6 months after arriving at Fort Benning, Sarah receives a package with no return address. Inside is a photograph and a letter written in careful English. The photo shows a young man with a bandaged hand standing between tribal elders and Afghan government officials. Hamid Al-Zawahiri, smiling slightly, looking nothing like the furious 19-year-old who led an assault on Point Romeo. The letter is brief. "Sergeant Mackenzie, you spared my life when you could have taken it. Chose to destroy a radio instead of adding my death to your record. I did not understand this mercy at the time, thought it was weakness or mistake. But Command Sergeant Major Ortega showed me a photograph of my father before war changed him. Told me I could honor my father through revenge or through becoming what he might have been if circumstances were different. I chose the second path. I am now studying engineering in Turkey under asylum agreement. Your restraint gave me the chance to honor my father's original dream instead of his final nightmare. I do not forget. I do not forgive the death you brought, but I acknowledge the life you allowed. Perhaps that is enough, Rashid." Sarah reads the letter 3 times, shows it to her therapist who asks how it makes her feel. Sarah does not have words for the complexity. Relief that her choice to not kill him has borne fruit. Grief that it required his father's death to create the possibility. Pride that restraint proved more powerful than revenge. Guilt that 6 Allied soldiers died to create the circumstances that led to this outcome. The therapist helps her understand that all these feelings can coexist. That moral complexity does not require choosing one emotion and discarding others. That being human means holding contradiction without needing to resolve it into simple answers. 1 year after Afghanistan, on October 14th, Sarah returns to Montana, to the ranch that no longer belongs to her family but still holds her father's grave. The cemetery is small, just a few dozen headstones marking men and women who carved lives from hard country and left legacies measured in soil and sweat rather than money or fame. Jack Mackenzie's headstone is simple gray granite. Name, rank, dates of service, date of death. No mention of Vietnam or the shot at Hugh City or the 40 years he carried weight that eventually crushed him. Sarah kneels in the grass that is finally growing back after the long Montana winter. I made your shot, Dad. Exceeded it by 300 meters. Set a record that will probably stand for decades. She traces the letters of his name carved into stone. But I'm not going to die the way you did. Not going to let the weight crush me into making the same choice you made. I'm going to live. Going to teach. Going to make your pain mean something by preventing it in others. A truck pulls up to the cemetery entrance. Command Sergeant Major Luis Ortega climbs out slowly, cancer and age both taking their toll, but not yet taking him completely. He walks to where Sarah kneels, moving with the careful precision of a man conserving energy for battles that matter. Figured I'd find you here, Gunny says, settling onto a bench near her father's grave with a grunt of effort. Anniversary of the shot, day you became famous and infamous in the same trigger pull. How long, Sarah asks, meaning the cancer, meaning the timeline, meaning how much longer until she loses one more person who understands. Doctors say maybe 6 weeks. Ortega's voice is matter of fact. Cancer spread to my liver and lungs. No point in more treatment. Just making me comfortable while the clock runs down. But I wanted to make this trip before I couldn't. Wanted to pay respects to your father and make sure you were keeping your promise. What promise? The one where you don't follow his path, where you choose life even when it's hard, where you use what he taught you to be better than he managed to be. Sarah stands, faces Gunny directly. I'm trying every day, teaching kids to think before they shoot, getting therapy, building a life that's more than just the rifle. But some days it feels impossible. Some days the weight is too much, and I understand why Dad chose what he chose. Those are the days you call someone. Ortega's voice carries the authority of 40 years military service and 3 months left to live. Those are the days you remember you are not alone, that you got people who will carry it with you if you let them. Your father's mistake was silence. Don't make the same mistake out of some misguided loyalty to his memory. They stand together in the Montana cemetery while wind moves through grass and carries the scent of pine and distance. 2 soldiers from different generations bound by the same fundamental truth, that some shots change everything and you live with the consequences or you die from them, and choosing life requires more courage than choosing death. I got something for you. Ortega pulls a small box from his jacket. Your father gave me this the day before he died, made me promise to give it to you when you were ready. I think you're ready now. Inside the box is a scope, the same scope her father used in Vietnam to make his impossible shot at Hugh City, the same scope that traveled with him through 40 years of trying to outrun what he had done. Scratched and worn, but still functional, still carrying the accumulated weight of every target he ever engaged. He wanted you to have this, Ortega explains, wanted you to understand that the tool isn't what makes you dangerous. Your choices are what define you. This scope helped him save 200 Marines in Hugh. Also helped him kill men who never knew he existed. Same tool, different outcomes, all depending on the human using it. Sarah holds the scope carefully, feeling the weight of legacy and burden and hope, all compressed into metal and glass. This is not just equipment, this is her inheritance. Not the gift for shooting, but the responsibility to choose wisely what to do with that gift. Thank you, Gunny, for everything, for serving with my father, for watching over me, for making sure I didn't make his mistakes. Haven't made them yet, Ortega corrects gently, but you're making different mistakes, better mistakes, the kind you can survive and learn from. That's all any of us can do. Make mistakes we can survive while trying not to repeat the ones that killed the people before us. 2 months later, Sarah receives word that Command Sergeant Major Luis Ortega died peacefully at Walter Reed Medical Center, surrounded by soldiers who served with him across 4 decades and 6 wars. The funeral is full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. A horse-drawn caisson, a flag-draped coffin, a 3-volley salute that echoes across graves holding thousands of other soldiers who carried weight until they could not carry it anymore. Sarah attends in her dress uniform, sergeant stripes crisp and medals earned through choices both right and tragic. She stands at attention while they fold the flag and present it to Ortega's daughter, a West Point cadet who has her father's eyes and her grandfather's determination. The cycle continuing, the next generation preparing to make their own impossible choices and live with their own consequences. After the burial, after the reception, after the official condolences, Sarah finds a quiet corner of Arlington and pulls out her father's journal. She has read it cover to cover a dozen times now, knows every entry, every kill he recorded, every cost he calculated, every payment he made on a debt that eventually bankrupted his soul. But today she brings a pen. Today she adds her own entry. October 14th, 2013. 1 year since the shot at Sangin Valley, the longest confirmed kill at 3,147 meters, killed Hamid Al-Zawahiri, and in doing so triggered a chain of events that killed 6 Allied soldiers, saved 4 American lives, and gave one 19-year-old enemy fighter the chance to choose peace over revenge. I'm still learning to live with the math, still calculating whether the cost was worth the outcome. But I'm learning something Dad never figured out, that the equation doesn't have to balance perfectly to be worth solving, that you can carry the weight without letting it destroy you if you refuse to carry it alone. I miss you, Dad. Miss Gunny. Miss the person I was before I learned what pulling the trigger really costs. But I'm choosing to live with what I've become instead of dying from it. That's not victory, but it's survival, and some days survival is enough. She closes the journal and tucks it back into her bag next to her father's scope. 2 pieces of inheritance, one showing the burden, one showing the tool, both reminding her that she gets to choose what to do with the legacy she has been given. 5 years after Afghanistan, Master Sergeant Sarah Mackenzie stands in front of a different classroom. Not Fort Benning, but a civilian marksmanship program in Montana, teaching teenagers and veterans, and people who just want to learn to shoot without learning to kill. The Barrett is no longer on display. Instead, it is locked in a safe at home, a tool she no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. The students today include a 16-year-old girl whose grandfather served in Vietnam. The girl has natural talent and a chip on her shoulder about proving that gender does not determine capability. Sarah sees herself at that age, sees the same hunger to be excellent, the same need to honor someone who served, the same dangerous innocence about what excellence in this particular skill might eventually require. After class, Sarah pulls the girl aside. Her name is Emma. Her grandfather was a helicopter pilot who flew rescue missions until PTSD and survivor guilt drove him to alcoholism and an early death. "You're good," Sarah tells Emma. "Really good. Natural hand-eye coordination, good breathing control, excellent spatial awareness. You could be competitive level with proper training." "That's what I want," Emma says eagerly. "Want to make Grandpa proud. Want to show that girls can shoot just as good as boys. Your grandfather will be proud of you regardless of how well you shoot." Sarah chooses her words carefully. "But before you commit to this path, understand what it might lead to. Excellence in marksmanship opens doors. Some of those doors lead to competitions and Olympics and trophies. Some lead to military service and combat deployments and decisions that change you in ways you can't anticipate." Emma's enthusiasm dims slightly. "You're talking about killing people. I'm talking about the cost of being really good at something that has applications beyond paper targets." Sarah pulls out her phone and shows Emma the photo of Hamid Al-Zawahiri standing with peace negotiators. "I shot this young man's father from over 3,000 meters away. Set a world record. Also killed 6 Allied soldiers by accident and 7 enemy fighters on purpose. The kid in this photo is alive because I chose not to kill him. But that choice only existed because I was good enough to have the choice. Excellence creates options, but it also creates responsibilities you might not want." Emma studies the photo for a long moment. Did you want those responsibilities? Number Sarah's honesty is earned through 5 years of therapy and hard choices. I wanted to honor my father and use the gift he gave me. Didn't fully understand that using that gift would require killing people and living with having killed them. But now that I understand, I choose to use what I learned to teach others. Not just how to shoot, how to think about shooting, how to know when not to pull the trigger. Will you teach me that? Emma asks. Not just how to be good responsibly. Sarah thinks about her father who could not teach her because he was too broken by what he had done. Thinks about Gunny, who taught by example and wisdom earned through 40 years of service. Thinks about Danny, who taught that the best shot is the one you don't take. Thinks about Hayes, who taught that owning your mistakes is harder than making them. Thinks about all the people who carried weight so she could learn to carry it better. Yes, Sarah says, I'll teach you, but we start with the hard parts first. Before you learn to make the impossible shot, you learn why some shots should stay impossible. Deal. Deal. That evening, Sarah returns to the cemetery where her father is buried. His grave looks the same, but she has changed in the 5 years since she first knelt here and promised to live differently than he died. The weight is still present. The ghosts still visit. The nightmares still come some nights. But they no longer define her. They are part of her story, but not the ending of it. She sets her father's scope on the headstone, a symbolic return, the tool going back to the man who wielded it first. She does not need it anymore, has proven what she needed to prove, has learned what she needed to learn, has survived what he could not. I'm okay, Dad. The words are simple but true. Not healed, not free of guilt or grief or the accumulated weight of what I've done. But okay, learning to carry it, learning to let others help me carry it, learning that your death doesn't have to define my life unless I choose to let it. Wind moves through the Montana grass and carries the scent of pine and possibility. Somewhere in the distance, a rifle cracks at a shooting range where someone is learning to put bullets on target without understanding yet what it costs to put bullets on people. Sarah will teach them. Will make sure the next generation understands not just the mathematics of distance, but the morality of choosing whether to close that distance with violence. Her phone buzzes. A text from Jessica Reeves, who is now serving in Afghanistan with her own sniper team. Made my first combat shot today. 847 meters. Saved 3 guys from an ambush. But I keep thinking about what you taught me. About the keys. Is it normal to feel guilty even when you did the right thing? Sarah types her response carefully. Yes, completely normal. Means you're human. Means you understand that even right choices have consequences. Talk to your chaplain or counselor. Don't carry it alone. Call me anytime. Proud of you. She adds one more message. Your father would be proud too. The sun sets over Montana in shades of gold and crimson. Sarah Mackenzie, holder of the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history, walks back to her truck carrying her father's legacy and her own hard-won wisdom. Tomorrow she will teach more students, will pass on lessons learned through tragedy and triumph. Will try to make sure that fewer fathers end their own lives because they could not live with the weight of what service required. By making their sacrifices mean something. By making their sacrifices mean something beyond suffering. By transforming weight into wisdom and burden into purpose. Sarah has traveled further than the 3,147 meters her bullet flew. Has covered the infinite distance between the person who made that shot and the person who chooses every day to survive having made it. Has learned that the longest shot is not measured in meters, but in the years you live after pulling the trigger, and whether those years honor the gift or squander it. She drives home through the gathering dark, past ranches that look like the one her family lost, past veterans' memorials that list names of men and women who carried weight unto death, past the ordinary lives of people who will never know what it costs to be excellent at killing, but benefit from that excellence nonetheless. At home, she opens her laptop and begins writing the next chapter of a book she has been working on for 2 years. A manual for military snipers that includes not just ballistics and tactics, but ethics and psychological preparation and resources for dealing with the aftermath. The book her father never had. The guide she wishes she had been given before she made her record shot. The chapter is titled When Not to Shoot. It begins, the best snipers are not the ones who can make the longest shots. They are the ones who can calculate not just whether they can make the shot, but whether they should. This calculation cannot be done through mathematics. It requires something deeper. Wisdom, restraint, understanding that every trigger pull creates ripples that spread in ways you cannot predict or control. Your job is not just to be lethal, your job is to be responsibly lethal. To understand that the power to take life from distance creates obligations to choose wisely when to exercise that power. Sarah writes until midnight, words flowing from experience earned in blood and carried in nightmares and transformed through therapy and teaching into something that might help the next generation avoid some of her mistakes, might help them survive what broke her father, might give them the tools to carry weight without being crushed by it. Before bed, she opens her father's journal one last time, reads his final entry, then she writes her own new entry beneath his. 5 years since Sangin Valley. Still teaching, still learning, still choosing life, even on the days when death feels easier. I carry what you couldn't, Dad, but I don't carry it alone. That's the difference. That's what saves me. I forgive you for not knowing there was another way, and I honor you by finding that way and teaching it to others. Your daughter, Sarah. She closes the journal and places it on the shelf next to the scope and the medals and the photograph of Hamid Al-Zawahiri choosing peace. These are her inheritance. These are her burden. These are her purpose. The nightmares will come tonight like they always do. 6 faces she never saw in life. 7 men she killed from distances that made it feel surgical. A father who chose death over seeking help. A mentor who died from cancer earned through decades of service. All the ghosts that come with being good at something that requires taking human life. But tomorrow she will wake up. Will go to the range. Will teach students who depend on her to give them not just skills but wisdom. Will choose survival over surrender. Will make one more payment on the debt her father could not afford. The math may never balance. The equation may never resolve cleanly. But Sarah Mackenzie has learned that some debts are meant to be carried, not paid off. That the weight can be distributed across shoulders willing to help. That the longest distance is not between shooter and target, but between the person who pulls the trigger and the person who learns to live with having pulled it. She has traveled that distance, not easily, not without cost, but she has arrived at a place her father never reached. A place where the burden is heavy but bearable, where the ghosts are present but not overwhelming, where tomorrow holds possibility instead of just more weight. Some shots echo across generations. Some distances span more than meters. Some legacies are measured not in records broken, but in patterns interrupted. Sarah Mackenzie made it the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history, but her greatest shot was the one she did not take, the one that saved a 19-year-old enemy fighter, and in saving him, saved herself. Proved that restraint is not weakness, that mercy has power, that the math of war includes variables that cannot be calculated on paper but matter more than any equation. She sleeps, dreams, wakes to morning light and the sound of her phone alarm playing reveille. Another day, another choice to live with what she has done and who she has become. Another opportunity to make her father's pain mean something beyond just a cautionary tale. The Barrett sits locked in its case, cleaned and ready, but no longer needed to prove anything. The record stands. The legacy is written. What remains is the living, the teaching, the daily choice to carry weight without letting it crush her. Sarah Mackenzie, daughter of Jack Mackenzie, student of Luis Ortega, teacher of the next generation, rises to face another day. Not a perfect day. Not a day without ghosts or guilt or the accumulated burden of impossible choices, but a day that is hers, a life that is hers, a future that is hers to write instead of inheriting pre-written tragedy. And that, she has learned, is the only math that truly matters. Not how far the bullet traveled, but how far she has come since pulling the trigger. The longest distance she will ever cover. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one life lived in defiance of the weight that killed her father and threatened to kill her too. Some legacies are inherited, others are chosen. Sarah has chosen hers, and in choosing has proven that the shot that matters most is not the one that breaks records, but the one that breaks cycles. The distance between death and life, measured not in meters but in moments of choosing to continue when stopping, would be easier. She has made that shot every day for 5 years. Will make it again tomorrow and the day after, for as long as it takes. The math may be impossible, but Sarah Mackenzie has proven she can make impossible shots, even the ones that save her own life instead of taking someone else's. especially those. Real talk. I almost didn't tell this story because it makes our military look imperfect. But then I realized hiding the complexity is what actually disrespects veterans. Sarah made a world record shot and 6 allies died because command withheld intel about the bomb. She did everything right and it still went wrong. That's not failure. That's war. My question, do we honor veterans more by only telling hero stories or by showing the impossible choices that create PTSD in the first place? Veterans and military families, I need your voice on this. What stories should I tell?